Drifted toward right. Wow, back to the warning track. Leaping try. It's gone. Victor Scott has hit a home run. Swing, fly ball, fair. Deep left. At the wall. That one's gone. The Cardinals are in scoring position in the batter's box. Two two-run homers, and we lead for the first time.
Back up the middle. That deflects off Helsley. Wynn's got it. Fires to first. And the Cardinals win it. Just how we drew it up.
That's what it sounded like last night on Bally Sports Midwest. Good to hear Chip Carey's voice as we come into the show today because the Cardinals got a win last night with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. That is the place to get involved in the show today. Hopefully you will do so because it's a happier show today. Cardinals get a victory last night. It was close. Didn't like that. My butt puckered a little bit as we got into the ninth inning and Ryan Helsley was on the mound and he did his old Trevor Rosenthal impression. Don't need any more of that, Hells. Let's go ahead and put these away a little easier next time, please, for all of us involved. That being said, that was the formula for them. They get a good start out of Sonny Gray, 7 innings from him. He settled down after the first couple. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. They get a nice play there at the very end by Mason Wynn. You get Helsley, who locks it down, even if it was eventful. And most importantly, T-Bone, they got the power. They got the power that they needed. Now, they got it from a surprising place. Victor Scott with a 2-run home run, his first of his career, and then Tommy Pham doing what he does, which is hit for power.
Forgot how much I miss Pham.
That guy's amazing. T-Bone, is that the formula, what we saw last night for this team to be able to continue to have success down the stretch? Lots and lots of power, even if it doesn't come with runners in scoring position?
Yes. Yes, this is why I scream from the mountaintops. They need to slug, baby, slug. Because you know what you do when you hit for power? You put up crooked numbers on the board. You can go from a hit batter to all of a sudden there's 2 runs on the board. Instead of going station to station where you need 4 hits to score a run. Last night you needed it in 2 hits to score a run because of a base hit and a 2-run homer, and then just 1 hit to score 2 runs. That's why we talk about slug, baby, slug. On top of the idea of, hey, well, guess what? They had swing and miss with their pitching staff last night. Well, not from Helsley, but from everybody else involved in the game. Sonny Gray was amazing. That's the formula for the rotation. You've got to get a solid outing from him to then turn it over to the bullpen arms. But offensively, that's what they need to do. They need to hit for power, whether it is with runners in scoring position, which would be nice for a change.
0 for 6 last night in that regard.
Oh, man, brutal. Or if it's not what guys on. 3 for the last
40 now? Is that right?
Yeah, something in that range. Yeah, 3 hits since the Chicago series. But that is the formula because that's what allows you to put up those crooked numbers. And you know what's fun watching the Cardinals? Not when they're going station to station, when they have the bases loaded, Arenado does his thing and hits into a double play. It's when they hit for power. That's when you really enjoy watching Cardinals baseball. You dig the long ball. You won't admit it, but you do dig the long ball.
Somebody on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, why do they go station to station and not run more often? Well, they don't have a lot of guys that can run on this team. If we're just being totally like, look at the lineup last night. Who are you having as your stolen base threats? Mason Wynn to a degree has some of that. I guess Pham, maybe a little bit. Tommy Pham, he's not really a guy that's going to be stealing a bunch of bases. And then you got Contreras, Goldie, Arenado, Burles, and Gorman. Pages. Who would you like to run with? I don't think this is a managerial decision. I think a lot of this, like we say, you got to run more, well, have the personnel to do it. If you got the guys that can go out there and run, they'll do that. But right now, you don't have those players on your active roster. Siani is somebody that does that a lot. Well, Siani's not out there right now. Victor Scott got on base once last night, and it was to run around the bases because he hit a home run. So if he gets on, yeah, you would expect him to be somebody that can help you in that regard, but he's got to get on, and he's got to stay on the bases, and I liked what he did last night, where he gets to just stroll around the bases instead of sprinting around them. It is a team that is kind of station to station at times, and a lot of that is because of the personnel that they have, but if they want to win a bunch of games down the stretch, and they've got to win like 30 of their last 50 games, as Tommy Pham said, to be able to get into the postseason, they're going to need to do more of what they did last night, and preferably doing that with runners in scoring position. Do damage with guys on. That is the formula to win in 2024. I know it's not what you grew up with watching the 80s Whitey Ball Cardinals, but this is what it is nowadays, and for the most part, the best teams in baseball, this is how they go about it. They go about it with a lot of slug, and they put up a bunch of runs because of it. That's what the Diamondbacks are doing. That's what the Phillies do. That's what the Dodgers do. They go out there and they hit the ball hard, They get on, and then they hit the ball hard some more. And that's the way that they get them in instead of get them on, get them over, get them in. It's just get them on, and then boom, get them in immediately because you hit a double, you hit a triple, you hit a homer. That's the best way to win in 2024.
For me, that's not promising. I mean, it just doesn't do it for me.
You didn't have fun last night?
Sure. What do you mean by it's not promising? Explain that a little bit.
I can know how to bake a cake, but if I don't have the ingredients, I'm not going to be able to bake that cake. The Cardinals can know that they need to hit for power and hit home runs, but if they don't have the players to do it, it's not going to happen. I mean, last night was fun, but that's not sustainable. The ingredients that they do have expired about a year ago. So, I mean, you can want them to hit home runs and hit for power all you want. I don't see that happening down the stretch consistently enough for them to string wins together and become a playoff team.
I mean, it's a totally fair point. It's a more than reasonable point. And it goes to what ESPN.com had to say about the Cardinals earlier today. They wrote about, like, hey, how's the stock looking for every team in Major League Baseball? And for the Cardinals, they wrote about the stock up, stock down for the team. And they said, hey, for the Cardinals, they're hitching their wagon to Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. And they gave them 11%. That's their chances, the Cardinals, according to ESPN.com, to get into the postseason this year. And the reason why is because, hey, it's all coming down, once again, to Arenado and Goldie, is that this team was not built to be able to succeed when those guys are going through a down season. And right now, with only less than 50 games remaining at this point, it looks like that's just going to be the case. And so they basically wrote off the Cardinals as a team that can succeed down the stretch. And it gets into, once again, what we saw last night on the runners and scoring position number. I know they won. It felt good. That was a fun game to watch, in my opinion. I enjoyed watching that game. Kind of reminded me of the Cubs win from last week, I guess. Or I guess the Cubs lost, honestly. The Helsley blew it up game.
You had fun with that one?
No, I had fun for the first 8 innings. And last night felt kind of similar, but just with a better finish to the game where Helsley's able to get out of it instead of blowing it at the very end. Some of these games are really fun to watch if you're a neutral baseball observer. The hard part is when you're watching it as a Cardinals fan, it ain't a whole lot of fun to watch because there's anxiety from start to finish. And this comes back to Arenado and Goldie. I asked you guys this earlier today because I wanted to look it up because anecdotally, it feels as though every time Nolan Arenado comes up to the plate, I'm assuming with runners in scoring position, he's going to fail. I'm assuming that now because it feels like that's all that's happened for us is that, hey, runner on second, 2 outs, Arenado up at the plate. Oh, well, I know how this one ends. Last night I think it was 2 on, 2 out, runner on first and second, if I'm not mistaken. Arenado comes up to the plate. I looked over at Kerber and I said, well, we know how this one ends. I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of things done in the kitchen real quick because Nolan Arenado was about to ground into a double play.
I had the same thought. No, I didn't say it to anybody because nobody was with me. I just said it to myself. I was like, this is not going to go well.
Guess what happened?
Into a double play.
He hit into a double play. Because that's what he does, man. Like, I assume the worst, and I hate it about myself because I'm generally speaking a pretty optimistic guy. Not with this guy right now. Not with Nolan Arenado. And it's because the numbers back up what it feels internally. I asked you guys about this earlier today. How many times do you think Nolan Arenado, since I think it's June 4th, has a extra base hit with runners in scoring position? How many times do you guys think? You guys said, well, 3, 4, 5, maybe. It's 1.
By the way, I thought you said that went back to May.
Is it May? May 4th? Yeah. It's been a long time since he's had success with runners in scoring position. Yeah, it's going back to May 4th. So we're talking about 3 months of baseball. He has 1 extra base hit with runners in scoring position. And it was the home run that he had. It was the same game. He and Paul Goldschmidt both had home runs with runners in scoring position. It was like, they're fixed. It was against the Nationals. And since then, they've been basically nothing with runners in scoring position. And you look at the Cardinals' numbers, 3 for 40 since the Cubs series with the runners in scoring position. It ain't hard to find out why. It's the middle of the order. It's that 2, 3, 4, 5 spot in the middle of the order for the Cardinals that's doing nothing. Last night, Contreras 0 for 2, Arenado 0 for 1, Goldie 0 for 1, Pham 0 for 2. There's your offense. Those are the guys that are supposed to come through. Those are the guys that are supposed to put up big numbers for you offensively. And if that doesn't get fixed, hey, last night was great. I enjoyed watching it. Fun to watch. That Mason Wynn throw at the end of the game, hot damn, that guy is good. But ultimately, it's all meaningless if you can't get that figured out.
Yeah, and the big problem for the Cardinals is I think all three of us in this room are at this point now of Goldie Arenado aren't going to figure it out this season. You know, they're not going to suddenly find the fountain of youth here in the final, whatever it is, 45 games of the season and start hitting. But the problem for the Cardinals is like last night, for example, they have to hit in the top 5 of their order against a left-handed pitcher. They shouldn't be. Goldie Arenado on a contending team would be hitting outside the top 5 right now. The problem for the Cardinals is they just don't have better options. Not against a left-handed pitcher. Against a righty, I think there's a fair argument that you could just see at least Goldie at 5, but Arenado outside the top 5, so you avoid what you're talking about there, where he comes up constantly with runners in scoring position. Because why is the game finding him? Well, it's because he's in the top half of the order. But the Cardinals don't have guys better for that suited against left-handed pitching. And even against righties, Ollie continues to put him in the top 5. It's just not a fixable problem for the St. Louis Cardinals.
That's the thing. Like, okay, so we're taking him out. Who you putting in? You putting in the guy in Alec Burleson who's batting like 180 this month? Are you putting Nolan Gorman up there, who's striking out 37% of the time on the season, the most in a season at this point, where they've got at least 350 plate appearances since Chris Davis? Are we doing that? Like, I don't know who you're going to in the top 5 if you're not putting them there. I'm in favor of moving Goldie and Arenado down. I'm all for it. But I got to have a better option there for me, right? It's like substituting to Grant's point on the baking, right? Sometimes if you're cooking a meal, you can substitute something, right? You don't have coconut aminos, I'm going to go with some soy sauce. It works. It does the job. You figure it out as you go along if you're making an Asian dish. I got to have some kind of a substitution, though, right? I can't put, like, pasta in a dish that calls for, like, as a side that calls for bread. It's a different dish. So
you can, but then you get shut out 6-0 by the Mets.
Exactly. So. It's not a good position to be in if you're the manager of this team right now. You just don't have the middle of the order. And it turns out that's important for a contender to be able to have. He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis. And I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube off and running today. I'm kind of on the YouTube screen right now. A little off to the side. We'll get that figured out as we go along here. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL. That is where the graveyard chat is taking place today. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so. I don't understand it, but apparently the San Francisco 49ers are all in on trading Brandon Ayuk. We'll talk about that and the latest rumors with Ayuk and some NFL quick hitters. But next, I do want to talk about one of the positives from last night, and that was Sonny Gray. Gets you through 7 innings after a really bad start to that game. What are we seeing from Sonny lately, and has he made good on his promise that he would reestablish himself, recommit himself to the process leading into these games? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
If you're looking to start things off on the right foot, you want to flip the script, this is the guy that you want on the mound.
And Gray issues a leadoff walk to start the game. And a shot into right field. That's going to send Burleson back, and that baby is gone. Home run to right off the bat of Brandon Lau. And the Rays are off to a 2-0 lead. Little tapper hit to third. Nolan's got it. Patty kicks and fires. And Sonny Gray, an amazing final 6 innings. He threw 30 in the opening frame, gave up 2 runs, but nothing after that in game 1. Back up the middle, that deflects off Helsley. Wynn's got it, fires to first, and the Cardinals win it. Just how we drew it up.
That's what it sounded like last night on Valley Sports Midwest. Sonny Gray, rough start for him last night, rough beginning of the game for him last night, but eventually he's able to get it back on track. He has now gone at least 7 innings in 4 of his last 5 starts, T-Bone. I didn't think that was in play after he had thrown 30 pitches in the first last night, but he needs 76 pitches to get through the next 6 innings, and he does so to the tune of no more earned runs allowed, ends up with 6 strikeouts in the game, just the 1 walk, which was the leadoff walk, and that was a bit of an issue for him when he was going through his rough stretch kind of in the middle of the season this year. He was walking more guys than you typically would expect out of him. He's only walked 1 in each of his past 2 starts now. It seems like he's made good on his promise that he's recommitted to his process. Over his last 2 starts, he's gone 14 innings. He's given up a total of 4 earned runs. This is the guy that the Cardinals needed him to be. Opposing hitters are batting 177 against him in these 2 games. This is the Sonny Gray that the Cardinals were hoping and expecting to have down the stretch, T-Bone.
Yeah, and this looks like what a number 1 should look like, right? Where he goes out there and what happens, Cardinals are kind of a team that is on the, we talked about yesterday, they're in their fork in the road moment after losing 3 or 4 of the Cubs, getting just shellacked by the New York Mets. Team that's really scuffling, what do? You go out there and you be the stopper. And you do it on what you just talked about there, where early on it is, okay, I don't have my best stuff. I walk a guy, give up a 2-run homer, give up the single, and then you look at it and you look at Sonny Gray and he's able to settle in, and he's able to do what I've been begging for him to do most of the year, which is eat those 7 innings. That looked like a number 1 performance. Show up, be the stopper, have swing and miss stuff, and I loved his mentality after the game where he talked about it, where he said, hey, I'm the guy that's going to go out here. I said when we were down 2-0, I'm going to keep him here. I'm going to keep him here, and then when we got to the lead 4-2, the game is over. I love that mentality. That's the mentality of a number 1 starter.
Here's Sonny Gray talking about that after the game.
I needed that tonight. I didn't have a ton of energy going into it, a little sluggish. And then once we responded the way we did, I felt like it was up to me at that point to show up and for us to go win the game.
He sounded like he might have been sick yesterday. Like in his post-game press media availability, his voice just sounded different to me, and that's me playing like armchair doctor. I get that, but I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but hearing him after the game last night, I was like, oh, this dude sounds like he's been dealing with something illness-wise. And he went out there and he didn't look like himself in the first inning. He clearly had no command in that first plate appearance that it went up against him, and then he hung a slider, I think it was, curveball, it was a breaking ball of some kind, and it goes a mile away. And from there, I was like, oh boy, if this is the way that it's going to go for the Cardinals. It felt in the first inning, I don't know if you felt the same way, T-Bone, walk, home run, error by Mason Wynn. It's like, oh man, are we watching the beginning of the end of the Cardinal season?
Yeah.
Because coming off of what the last 5 games were, that Cubs series was a disaster, and then you have that game against the Mets, which determined a potential tiebreaker situation between you and the Mets. That sucks. Your offense looks terrible. You get into this game, Sonny doesn't look right, and it's like, oh boy. I don't know what the next month is going to look like, but if this is it, man, it's going to be a sad ending. And this is why you play 9 innings. This is why it's a marathon of a season, not a sprint at any point. They turn it around. You get the home run by Victor Scott. Then you get another one by Tommy Pham. You're like, all right, they're right back into this thing. Here we go. And it was a microcosm of what this season has felt like, where you get off to that 15-24 start, and we're doing our purge takes on the radio, and we're talking about this team as if they're dead. And I was talking about this the other day when I was on the morning show with Brooke, and she said, you know, what is the identity of the team? And she brought up like a lack of fight, right? And I was like, I can criticize a lot of things about the Cardinals, a lot of things about them this year. One thing I will not do is criticize their ability to like come back, whether that's in a game, in a season, whatever. This team has a fighter's mentality, and they find a way to get off of the mat and punch back for the most part. And we saw that again last night. And so I'll give them their credit for that. They're frustrating. They're unbelievably frustrating to watch, but they do have that ability to say, you know what, we're still in this thing. We're going to give ourselves a real chance. And last night we saw that again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think they're a team that doesn't fight back because they don't really get. Well, I mean, I guess they do get blown out occasionally. It's why they're such in a bad run differential
the other day.
spot.
That was a frustrating
but
one.
We've seen multiple times where they have come back in games before, and last night was one of them. And I was 100% with you. You know, when they went down 2-0 early on and like 3 batters into the game, you're going, man, you couldn't ask for a worse start. I thought for sure that was probably, okay, this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. You know, we talked about it yesterday. Is that the fork in the road moment for the Cardinals going into that game when they lost to the New York Mets? You can't have an outing where you've got your best pitcher on the mound and you lay another egg and you end up losing that game to the Tampa Bay Rays, and then you're kind of trying to play catch-up throughout that series, and they didn't do that. They end up getting, I would call it almost a rejuvenation when you see Victor Scott end up hitting his first career big league home run against a left-on-left matchup, which you're not really expecting because he's essentially up here just for defensive purposes. Yeah, I think they've got a little bit of fight in their game. It's just a matter of, do they have enough talent to actually put themselves over the edge?
So the other thing that I wanted to bring up, because Sonny, so much of his identity is tied into his sweeper, right? That's what helped him to become the pitcher that he is today. He reinvented himself, added that pitcher to his pitch into his arsenal, and it's unlocked everything else that he does. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, T-Bone, when he was struggling. We said, hey, I don't understand why this is the case, but the sweeper numbers are horrific. Like, people are finally starting to hit it, and it was discouraging because if that pitch doesn't work for him the way that it once did, you're in a bad place as an organization because that guy can't lose that pitch. On his last 2 starts, Sonny Gray has thrown that pitch 46 times, and opposing hitters are batting .063 against it. They do not have an extra base hit against his sweeper over his last 2 starts. That pitch has reemerged as being elite again, and it's no coincidence that Sonny Gray looks like an elite pitcher once that pitch is starting to work for him again. It's working off of his fastball, 4-seam, opposing hitters batting .182 over his last 2 starts as well. The cutter's still not been a great pitch for him lately, but those 2 pitches, the 4-seam and the sweeper, once they're working, everything else kind of falls into place for Sonny. So that's what's worked for him. One other thing that I wanted to get to pitching-wise from the Cardinals last night. Is Ryan Helsley tipping something? Because yesterday, it was a rough one once again for him in the 9th inning. He finds a way to wiggle out of it, and Mason Wynn was a big part of that. But 2 hits, did have the walk as well, allowed a run. You saw the run come through, and immediately the guy goes to talk to the player in the on-deck circle, tells him something that he's seeing from Ryan Helsley. We don't know what that was. Obviously, we're not privy to that conversation, but it seemed like they had something on him, and that was coming off of the Cubs series, where that team very clearly has something on Ryan Helsley this year that the rest of the league, at the time, it didn't feel like had. Is he tipping a pitch? Like, what are you seeing from Helsley right now, T-Bone?
I wonder if he's tipping his slider a little bit because we've seen him, like yesterday, I'm looking at kind of the pitch 3D, just seeing where all his pitches ended up last night. And for the most part, his slider ends up below the zone. There are 3 that are hung, and those are the ones that I think the damage was done on against him, where you saw the base hit, in play, no out, in play, out, and then just a called strike. So looking at his stuff, I think he's probably tipping a little bit because you're not seeing teams chase after his slider, or it almost looks like they're just sitting slider now, where they've become accustomed to. And I think this is what's fascinating across baseball is we've talked about why has he thrown his slider more this season? That's his number 1 go-to pitch. Well, it's because when you look at the numbers, it's his best pitch. Yep. And I wonder if you're starting to see teams now suddenly either A, they are finding something where he is tipping it, or B, they are saying, hey, the percentages say he throws a slider more, so instead of looking for his 101-mile-an-hour fastball, what am I going to do when I get up there? I'm just going to look for a slider. And I think it's one of those 2 things. I think it's either he is tipping that pitch a little bit somehow, some way, or it is the fact of the matter that teams are just up there now looking for a slider. And that's why I loved in that last at-bat last night, whether it was Helsley or Pajes, whoever it was that decided we're going to go this route, you know what? I'm ditching the slider. I'm going to let my fastball eat. And he was averaging 100 miles an hour on it. It was up almost 2 miles per hour on the season compared to his average. I think there's something to be said about the slider, but I do like the fact that he was willing to adjust back to the fastball. Somebody
on the text line from the 314 said, guys, can you please explain what and how tipping a pitch is? So basically it would be he's doing one motion, like for whatever reason, he is showing with his windup, or he is showing with his motion that this is a slider, this is a fastball. And it could just be a little thing, right? It could be something that he's doing in his glove that he's not noticing, that has become a habit for him, that other teams have keyed in on. And so the glove like flares one way when it's a slider, and it flares another way whenever it's a fastball. It could be that small, but teams pick up on that kind of stuff, and they'll tell the next guy in line, like, hey, be looking for this. This will show you what the tell is. So it could be as small as that. It could be as big as a different arm slot for the two different pitches. It's something different for everybody, but it sometimes happens when you get into a routine, and that's the biggest thing. T-Bone, did you have anything else to add on that?
No, I think outside of that, like it's all those little things. Whether it be that where he's you can see him manipulating the ball in his glove is one. Another one is maybe he has the glove position higher when he's throwing a fastball compared to a slider. Those are all the little things that the teams are trying to key in on and see if they can figure out what he's doing. Watching it last night, because I mean you could tell early on something was over the slider. I didn't see anything, but again, like I'm not going back and like watching it frame by frame by frame to see if I can pick up on. And
this is something that's happened with Helsley before.
Yeah.
Last year, I think it was.
Before too. I think there was a starter last year for the Cardinals. I don't remember who. Was it Montgomery maybe or Flaherty? Somebody had something where they were tipping something, and the Cardinals had to work with them.
I think Gio had that for a little bit as well, where Gio was tipping stuff. I think Helsley was another one that had some moments last year where he was tipping one of his pitches. So it's something that basically the Astros scandal, what they were trying to do, you're doing it to yourself. So instead of there being a trash can that tells the opposing team what's coming next, it's you with something that you're doing in your routine that ends up telling the opposing team what is coming up next. All right, he's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We're going to get into questions and answers in about 15 minutes or so. But next, we'll dive into some NFL quick hitters, including the latest with the Brandon Ayuk situation. The longer that this thing goes on, the more confused I get by what the 49ers are trying to accomplish here. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it's time for you to download the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois, because when you do so, you're going to win the most money possible. That's what this is all about, right? When you're betting on sports, you're not just doing it to have fun. You're trying to win money. And when you go over to the FanDuel Sportsbook or the DraftKings Sportsbook, they might have some big-time promotions going, but over time, you're not winning as much as you will with the Circa Sports app. They've got tight money line splits. They're going to have great futures odds. That's something that they really hone in on over there at Circa. And the other thing, they recommend shop around. Go see what the other lines are. I think you're gonna find that the best odds possible for you are over on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois. If you want to get a bet in right now to win the 2024 Super Bowl, you can do that on the Circa Sports app. For me, some of the teams that I'm honing in on going into this season, you can always bet on my Chiefs. They're at 5-1 over on Circa Sports. If you want to bet on somebody from, the NFC, for example, because you don't think that the 49ers are going to be able to do it without Brandon Ayuk, I like the Packers at 14-1 as a team that could get out of the NFC. The Bears at 56-1 odds. I don't know that they're going to be able to do it, but they've got some great odds over there. That's a long shot bet for you. It's all available for you on Circa Sports in Illinois. Download the app today. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals survived the Rays last night as they take home a win 4-3 over Tampa Bay. They did it hitting two-run home runs last night in the second inning, first from Victor Scott, then from Tommy Pham, and Sonny Gray, after a rough start, giving up a two-run home run in the first, ended up having a great start for the Cardinals, going 7 innings, only allowing 4 hits and those 2 earned runs from that two-run home run. Cardinals are back tonight against the Rays in Game 2 of this series. It'll be Eric Fedde looking for his first win as a Cardinal, going up against Taj Bradley for the Rays. First pitch from Busch will be at 6:45. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, according to a report in Pittsburgh, it is done. The Steelers, according to Andrew Filipponi, who hosts the afternoon show on their radio station up there, 93.7 The Fan, says the Steelers have a verbal agreement in place with the 49ers for Brandon Ayuk. All the terms of the deal and contract details, according to Andrew Filipponi, are being hammered out now. Quote, the wide receiver is coming to Pittsburgh, end quote. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think this is a day that the 49ers will live to regret. The 49ers are as all in on the 2024 season as any team possibly could be on any given season. They have Christian McCaffrey, who is in the prime of his career, but the twilight of his prime. They have Trent Williams, who's one of the best left tackles in the game, but he's getting up there in age, and you don't know how many years, if any years after this season, he has remaining at this level of play. They've got big-time money tied up into a lot of players right now, and their quarterback is extremely cheap. Deebo Samuel, no idea if he's going to be around beyond this upcoming season. They're all in. This is the year that they need to get over that hump that is the Kansas City Chiefs to win their Super Bowl championship. And the best way to do so is with Brandon Ayuk lining up at X receiver on opening night of the season for them. And they're willingly opting out of that opportunity for them. I don't get it at all. The reports seem to indicate there will not be a first-round pick coming back, so they're likely getting day 2 picks for Brandon Ayuk. And not only are they getting day 2 picks next year. They will be getting assets that do not help them in the 2024 season. For a top 10 receiver in the NFL, I wouldn't have paid him either right now. I would have said, show me one more great season. We don't have the cap situation to be able to do this right now. We'll get you taken care of next year. And if he doesn't agree to that, cool, sit at home. That's your option, Ayuk. He has forced their hand in every way. Man, credit to him. He apparently knew exactly where he wanted to go, which was Pittsburgh all along, and said, I'm not going to New England. They're willing to pay me top 5 money. I don't want to go there. Nix that deal. I don't want to go to Cleveland. Yeah, you've agreed to a trade with him. I don't care. Not going there. I'm not agreeing to a contract extension with them. The one team he was willing to do that with was Pittsburgh. They've apparently done so. I think this is crazy. I think the 49ers are making a massive mistake right now that they're going to live to regret, and it's going to cost them a Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Yeah,
or at least the opportunity to get a Super Bowl.
I can't wrap my head around the fact that somehow he was able to create leverage for himself in this situation. You're right. He has the leverage in terms of, I don't want to go to New England. Why? Because, I'm not going to sign a contract extension. You can trade me there, but New England's not going to give up what they're going to give up for me because I'm not signing a contract extension. If I'm the San Francisco 49ers, he would have been playing for me on opening night, or at least sitting up in the press box like your boy Chris Jones did and just miss out on his pay for a game.
Sure.
I don't understand why you would hold on to him at this point. Why you wouldn't hold on to him? If you said, "Hey, we can't get a deal done with Brandon Ayuk. We probably need to move on from him." Well, that's the conversation that needs to happen before the draft. To your point of that way, you can get, even if it is day 2 picks, you can get that to help you for this year's roster, a roster that is all in, that does have legitimate injury history question marks. Christian McCaffrey hurt yesterday at practice, strained his calf. Well, okay, all of a sudden I'm looking at this offense going, week 1 we may not have Ayuk because we traded him, and we may not have Christian McCaffrey. All of a sudden I'm looking at the 49ers going, yeah, they still got a good roster.
Huge injury questions, a history there.
Injury last year, shoulder injury that really hurt him, and a hamstring issue in the Super Bowl. I just don't know what you're doing if you're the San Francisco 49ers, because this is the year where it should be, this is like the last ride, where it is Super Bowl or bust. And you know what? If it doesn't work, then we just go our separate ways and we kind of start things a little bit fresh. We're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. I think it's after this season. This is the year to make this push. if they were a retooling team, like if they were, let's say that just flip the scenarios, say that this was like the Steelers, who are like a 500 team, I could totally get where you get to the point of,
or
we're
even
not
the
at this spot.
Vikings, right? Like the Vikings were at a place where it was time to go their separate ways. And like the Vikings are now, where the 49ers absolutely could be next year. And it would make sense for them to be like, you know what, we're going to take a step back so we can take a massive step forward. The Bills just did this, where they said, okay, we had our stretch of time where this was our core group of players. It's time to disassemble, get a little cheaper around Josh Allen, build through the draft, and in the next 3 years, we're going to have a different core that's built around him. That's probably coming for the 49ers. The Chiefs had to do that. The Bills had to do that. We've seen this with a lot of teams around the league. Once your quarterback gets expensive, you got to change the way that you construct your roster. The Bengals are probably going to have to do that next year with T. Higgins. Not now. No. Now is the exact wrong time to be able to go out there and do something like this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do still think, though, that the 49ers are going to be one of the favorites out of the NFC. I think it's going to cost them a couple wins, but I still feel like they have a good chance to at least get to the NFC Championship this season.
Your margin for error just decreases significantly
for sure
now.
And I don't understand that based off of where they are in their life cycle. I'm with you guys. Like, I don't understand why you would trade Ayuk unless he just flat out said he was not going to play. Like,
but even then, cool, call his bluff.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's not getting paid if he doesn't play.
Correct.
I mean, that's fair, but then if you do that, then you're missing out on potential assets you could have gotten back.
For next year. I could get those assets next offseason. If you don't want to play the entire season, cool. No, there is no difference in terms of what the 49ers will be getting if they trade him now versus March or April of next year, going into next year's draft. Because what they're getting is assets for next April. None of this will accrue until we get to the draft next year. So right now, my option is have Brandon Ayuk on the team, and he can decide if he wants to play this year or not. Or not have him on the team, and he goes and plays elsewhere, and we get nothing either way for this upcoming year that helps us win football games right now. So either way, it's a bad situation for me, but at least in one of those scenarios, there's a pretty decent chance Ayuk is going to play this year. Whether that's 11 games or 17 games, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be out there, and he's going to be balling out because he wants to get paid still. I would have just kept him. I would have kept him, and I know that it's like these things can be dicey with team chemistry and all of that. I get all of it. Guess what? They're pros. The job is to go out there and play football. And on Sundays, Brandon Ayuk is really freaking good at playing the game of football.
He is, but I guess just trying to make sense of this from the 49ers standpoint, I
think they blinked. I think they looked at it and said, like, this is just too much for us to handle. Well, be better. Be better at your jobs. Go out there and control the situation a little bit better.
Yeah, but depending on how Ayuk was going about it behind the scenes, if it was going to be something that they feared was going to affect the chemistry in the locker room and the overall just vibe for the team, and it was going to hinder them this season, you can kind of make sense out of that. Like, you don't want a guy like that around.
I can't because if that's the case, then go away. Don't be here for the next 6 weeks. That's fine. You can just miss out on $6 million towards your salary. You can continue to get fined $50,000 every single day that you're not here. I mean, it's his own money that he's screwing up. It's his own career that he's screwing up if you go about it that way. I'm just calling his bluff if I'm the team. I think teams have gotten a little soft with this stuff. Where it's like, hey, and I'm pro player, like, get all of your money. And Brandon Ayuk is apparently going to get a boatload of money in this deal. Good for him, man. He's earned it. He's a really good football player. And when you can get it in this sport, go out there and get your money. But if you're the team, if I'm looking at it through their lens, I think they were in a negotiation where it was a game of chicken. And one of us is ultimately going to have to lose in this game. And the 49ers are about to lose. If they trade Brandon Ayuk, he won in a massive way because this was his goal from day one was, I want my contract. I want to get traded if you're not going to give it to me here. And they said, okay, we'll go ahead and trade you then. He got everything he wanted in this deal.
Yeah, and if it was a issue behind the scenes with Brandon Ayuk, well, guess what? Then he just hurts his next contract as well because there's going to be less of a market for him if teams have to look at him and go, oh, well, that guy was a cancer in the locker room. Teams are going to pay him then. There's going to be a handful that will still say, oh, well, we can probably fix that. There are also going to be a handful of teams that suddenly go, oh, that's not our market.
All right, so we've made our thoughts known on where we stand on this, right? Like, I wouldn't have done it. T-Bunny, you wouldn't have done it. I think, Grant, you at least see it more from the 49ers perspective, which is fair. What does it mean now? 49ers probably, most likely, it appears, going to be without Brandon Ayuk for the entirety of the season. Now he's going to the Steelers. Let's start with the 49ers. In your guys' opinion, are they still the favorite to win the NFC this year without Brandon Ayuk on the field? I would say, to me, this means that they're no longer the favorite. I think the Lions today became the favorite to win the NFC.
I agree with you. I was going to say they're probably second in line to the Lions.
Yep.
I would probably put them kind of as co-favorites for me. I think now, I think you said it best yesterday, I think they were clearly the best team in the NFC. Now I think they've kind of just moved down a peg, and I think they're right there with Detroit.
I think you're going to find a little bit out about Brock Purdy now, too. And if he can elevate, that offense without one of his weapons, especially if they suffer an injury at some point this season, which, as you said yesterday, BK, is pretty typical for the 49ers. Like, they have injury issues.
Yep.
If they have injury issues, I wonder how Brock Purdy is going to be able to handle that.
Not well, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I think that the 49ers are now in the same tier as the Lions, the Packers, and potentially the Cowboys and Eagles, depending on how things go there. I don't trust either of those teams come playoff time, but I think those 5 teams are now kind of in tier 1 of the NFC. Let's go to the Pittsburgh side of things. How much does this change the way that you view the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into 2024?
I still don't know if they're a playoff team with Brandon Ayuk. Maybe I'm in the minority there. I just don't think they have a very talented roster. And I especially don't know what they're doing at quarterback.
Their defense is good.
The defense is good. Still offensively, though, I just don't know. Like, he's going to help out, but I'm still skeptical of that team. And we don't know what the quarterback situation looks like. Like, it sounds like Russ currently is still the favorite based on what Mike Tomlin said this morning at training camp. But even though, like I know what you're saying there, like, oh, trust me, I would much rather start Justin Fields because I think there's a higher ceiling than there is with Russell Wilson. I've also seen the floor of Justin Fields.
Sure.
And maybe he actually cannot be fixed. So I still have the Pittsburgh Steelers on the outside looking in until I get a better idea of what the quarterback situation really looks like.
It's better than it was last year. I know that much.
And
I don't know if it's good, but I know it's not good, but I know it is also better than what it was last year. And they won 10 games last year, guys.
Yeah.
Like, this is a team that with this coaching staff in place, with Tomlin there, they win 9 to 10 games. Just, that's what they do. And with Ayuk now in place, I think they're a playoff team. I think they're one of the wild card teams in this AFC. I think the AFC is really good, but I think they're going to be one of them. We're going to get to January, and I'm going to bet like hell against them. Like, I will bet on whoever they're playing in the first round of the AFC playoff race. But I think they're going to make the playoffs because they've got an excellent defense, and now they've got an offense that I think will be better than it was a year ago.
I thought they were a playoff team before this trade just because of the fact that they just were a playoff team with Mason Rudolph. And I know there's not a lot of certainty when it comes to Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, whoever they end up going with. But what is certain is that either of those players is better than what you had in Mason Rudolph. So, again, the key to what you said, the coaching staff, what they're able to do. I have full faith that the Steelers will still be in the playoff pictures because that's just what they do. And you look at their wide receiver core now, you got Brandon Ayuk being added to the mix. You've got George Pickens, who they're very high on. They acquired Van Jefferson this offseason.
He stinks.
He's not great, but, I mean, if George Pickens can live up to what the Steelers think
Roman
he can.
Wilson too. I think Roman Wilson
That's a good one too.
Third round pick for them.
That's a good one too.
They've upgraded the offensive line. They took a offensive lineman in each of their first 2 picks.
I think they kind of fall into that tier, and it's like I just don't think they're. When I look at the playoff picture in the AFC, they're like in the tier for that last wild card with them, Cleveland, Indy, and then maybe Tennessee. I just don't know what to expect out of Tennessee Titans.
Miami, the Jets, Bills, like all of those teams, throw them into a blender. 3 of them are going to come out. You know, and that's kind of the way that I view the AFC this year. Is there's a lot of teams that are in that mid-tier together. And I mean, the Jaguars, like, dude, the Jaguars are in a really interesting spot right now because I think the Colts potentially are better than them this year. I think the Ravens, Browns, and Steelers are all better than them this year. Throw the Bengals into that mix as well. Jets, Dolphins. The Jaguars have a chance to go like 6-11 this season, and everybody's getting fired, and we'll see what happens with Trevor Lawrence.
Good thing they just paid their quarterback.
Yeah. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, it's possible that Victor Scott ends up being the long-term answer for the Cardinals in center field. Is it also possible that he's the short-term answer, even when Michael Siani returns from his injury? Is he going to wally pipp Michael Siani here? We'll talk about that coming up at 12 o'clock. Questions and answers coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. We'll talk about the potential of Victor Scott Wally pipping Michael Siani in about 10 minutes or so. But T-Bone, let's start out with this from the 314. Are you guys like me and ready to move on from the Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt era of Cardinals baseball? Yes, I am. I don't think that you're going to be able to move on from Nolan Arenado this offseason because I don't see a team that's going to be willing to take on his salary, and I don't see the Cardinals eating salary in a situation like that. But yes, I am very much ready to move on. Here's a follow-up question for you, because I think we're all probably in that same page.
Yeah.
Is it more likely, we'll do more likely to happen coming up later on today, is it more likely that both Arenado and Goldie are back next season, or that they're both gone next season?
It's unfortunately more likely they're both back, probably.
I agree.
Because I could totally see where they look at Paul Goldschmidt and they're like, legacy player. And again, I don't get it because he didn't even start his career here. But I could totally see where the Cardinals bring him back and they say, Paul Goldschmidt, starting first baseman, 2025, and maybe even 2026.
Oh, God. 55 years old.
Yeah,
Here comes
I can't.
Goldie. This is the year he's going to get back on track.
I can't believe that we are at that point. But yeah, I would say it's probably, I'm ready to move on. I actually think Arenado has become a very much of a major problem for the St. Louis Cardinals, both on and off the field. But I look at it and I say, it's probably more likely they're both back.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I kind of wish the front office would have the Doug Armstrong approach in 2023, which is just trade O'Reilly.
Great, we're going by Army. He's stuck with his
trade
defensive
Tarasenko.
core.
Well, I'm talking about something different, though. Don't spin it.
You know I'm right, though. Like, we talk about bad contracts.
No,
Krug,
I
Fultz,
was
bad
talking
contract,
about
can't move
trading
them.
your legacy players.
Sure.
Like that's what you got to do. And I wish that they would take that approach and just move on. And I think it'd be refreshing for the fan base. I think it would be something that if they just came out and they were open and honest about how they're going about it, and they traded these players and they moved on and they said we're turning a page, I think the fan base would react well to that.
I agree.
But I don't see it happening.
From the 314, guys, have we seen Alec Burleson have serious regression in the second half of the season? I think what we're seeing from Alec Burleson is what you should expect. Any player that relies heavily on batted ball luck is going to go through some ebbs and flows. And so Burleson's going to have hot streaks where he's hitting the ball incredibly hard and it's falling. And then he's going to have some really frustrating moments where, like for the last 12 games, he's batting 128 with a slugging percentage of 192. That's going to happen, and you just got to live with it. It's not the same as the Gorman ebbs and flows because those are so much more frustrating. He strikes out every 2 times that he's up to the plate. Even in this stretch, Alec Burleson has 5 strikeouts in his last 50 at-bats. He's not striking out at all. Just the batted ball luck isn't there for him, and so is he regressing? I don't know. I think this is just kind of what you have to expect with a guy like Burleson that lives on batted ball data. He's batting 122 on balls in play in his last 12 games. That's not sustainable. He's going to be fine. I think he's going to get back on track. But right now, yeah, he's going through a little bit of a cold stretch.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about it just because you're right. He's bat to ball contact guy. He doesn't strike out much. I mean, 8% strikeout rate during that stretch. Like that's not bad. That's pretty good. Like I think at some point you're going to see him come through. I do wonder if you're going to see some of his power continue to regress because he's not hitting the ball. He's slugging 290 during the stretch, and some of that probably is some batted ball luck. But I also don't feel like he has really barreled the ball as well lately. I think you'll see him get back on track. I'm not overly worried about Alec Burleson.
Next thing up here, BK, I want to know your realistic guess for when the Cardinals will be a legitimate contender to win the World Series again. 2026 is probably the correct answer on that. Get a couple more years with Mason Wynn under his belt. Donovan's still here. Nootbaar potentially still here. Walker, you would assume, if you're still optimistic about him, and I am, at that point is like a regular major leaguer. Burleson's still around. All of those guys still relatively cheap. And at that point, the hope would be you've got at least 3 through 5 in your rotation that are homegrown pieces, and you have a little bit of money left over to be able to pay for a 1 or a 2. And at that point in time, if you've got the right guy in charge of your baseball operations, you've modernized your pitching approach as well, So I'll go 2026 would be my realistic guess on when they could be World Series contenders again 2 years from now.
I'm going to say 2028. I think you need like 3 years of Walker in the big leagues before you're actually kind of really pushing. And you got Walker Wynn up there at that point. Burley's kind of established. You then have some of those arms that aren't just like starting to break ground, but hopefully have actually broken ground and have like cemented themselves into the rotation. And then you just got to kind of go out there and, in theory, sign whether it be a bat that helps you out or you end up signing a pitch that ends up being at the top of the rotation. I think they're further away. I think it's 2028 before I can really believe that.
You talking about 2026, how many pitchers in the starting rotation do you think the Cardinals currently have in their system that will be starting in 2026?
In their system, so like from A ball all the way to here.
Yeah.
3. Probably 3. I couldn't tell you right now who they are, but like between the guys that are currently at AAA, so Graceffo, McGreevy, all the rest of the players currently there, plus Quinn Matthews, plus Tink Hens, plus the guys they drafted this year, Jerpy, Bedell, keep going on from there. I would say you get 3 of them that end up in your rotation at that point in time. And I mean, if I'm being honest, it's probably 3 through 5 in your rotation. Palante you could throw into this mix as well. I don't think you have a single front end of the rotation starter from that group that I just mentioned there. I don't think a single one of them is going to be a 1 or a 2. But if you've got those guys 3 through 5, now that opens up money that you can spend on 1 and 2. That's the important part that I think we undersell on developing pitching internally. It's not just about getting that ace from internal. It's about, okay, I have 3 pitchers at the back end of my rotation that I can trust and believe in that are making $1 million a piece. So instead of paying Michaelis $18 million and Kyle Gibson $12 million and Lance Lynn $12 million, I've got those 3 spots in my rotation for $3 million total. So instead of spending $40 million on those 3 spots, I'm spending 3. That $37 million can be reallocated elsewhere, and it allows you to spend the money in a better way, in my opinion.
It's funny because, like, that's the right approach. I love everything you just said. The Cardinals don't do that.
Yeah.
The reason that
it would have to be a different philosophical approach from the new president of baseball operations.
And I don't think Chaim Bloom's doing that. I think it's an ownership thing. I don't think it's a Pobo thing. I think it's an ownership thing. If I told you any Pobo, I said, hey, you got $37 million, go get a number 1, they'd be drooling because they'd be so excited. But I would say they need to develop an ace because they won't go out and spend the money for one.
I don't think you have anybody internally that's going to be that. He's Tanner. That is Grant. I'm BK. Alex out today. He's going to be back in with us next week. He's out on paternity leave. He's got a few more days out on that. Coming up next, is it possible for Victor Scott to wally pipp Michael Siani in center field? We'll tell you our answers on it coming up here on 101 ESPN.
Swing and a high fly ball lifted toward right. Wow, back to the warning track. Leaping try. It's gone. Victor Scott has hit a home run.
You know what I love to see, T-Bone? That audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. I love to see when a player makes a legitimate adjustment in their game because they've dealt with failure and have to look themselves in the mirror and say, am I going to keep going the way that I always have, the way that I have reached this place of basically the pinnacle of my profession? But because of my failures, do I change and see if that works, or do I keep going with what's worked for me in the past? I like when guys are willing to look at themselves and say, I need to change. What I'm doing right now is not working. I have to do something to unlock my full potential. And that's what we've seen from Victor Scott. Victor Scott apparently had a conversation with Ryan Ludwig down in the minor leagues, and Luddy went down to AAA. He's one of the roving instructors for the Cardinals. He's working with some of the guys down in the minors, and he saw him in the cage, and he said, Vic, what you're doing is not working. What you're doing with your lower half is not going to allow you to be the hitter that you need to be to have success at the big league level. Even if it works occasionally for you in AA like it did last year, or in AAA like it has at times this season, it's not sustainable, and it's not something that's going to allow you to be the major leaguer that you believe you should be. And Victor Scott said yesterday to the media that was assembled at Busch Stadium, listen, I've heard this before. I've heard it from my dad. I've heard it from coaches. I've heard it from managers, but it always worked for me. My swing was working. And then suddenly this season, it didn't work anymore. And he said, apparently that conversation, right person, right time, it clicked for Victor Scott. I need to change. And I don't know specifically when that conversation took place, so I can't point to a date at which he talked with Ryan Ludwig, and then boom, the production was there to follow. But since July 2nd, so over the course of a month, July 2nd to August 2nd, right before he was called up to the big league level, he was batting .255, but he had an on-base percentage of .355 and a slugging percentage of .415. He had 2 doubles, 3 home runs, and a triple in that 20-game stretch. The bat was seemingly unlocked by what they were able to do with his new stance, his new leg kick, and he was able to unlock some power that he had not been able to get to earlier in the season. T-Bone, I want you to hear what Ollie Marmol had to say about Victor Scott's swing change from last night. I want to get your thoughts on what he's done with this.
I would describe it as just more athletic. He's in his legs in a way where he feels more comfortable and has more leverage. So I'd like to continue to watch it over time, but the way I would describe it is more athletic.
I think that's what Victor Scott described it as well. Is he's unlocking his lower half, and he's in a more athletic stance to be ready when he's in there. What have you seen from him? And how much has it changed your outlook for what Victor Scott could be now for the St. Louis Cardinals?
In terms of changing my outlook based on what I've seen and just in his 2 games that he's played at the
it's
plate,
small sample size.
It looks like a more of a Major League Baseball swing. You know, like I saw a side-by-side video last night of what it looked like early on in the year, and now the more athletic approach that Ollie was talking about there. And it almost looked like he was like stuck in concrete in the first iteration of his swing. You know, where he's not generating a lot of that lower half power. He's not got that leg step. He just kind of is in the box, and he's just kind of swinging the bat. This swing, at least to me, looks more, as Ollie said, athletic. Looks like it can generate more pop into his bat, to where you almost think he could probably start to drive the baseball if he sees and recognizes the pitches at the plate. And I love the fact that he was willing to have that aha moment that you're talking about. You know, as much as we talk about like guys like Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker, who got sent down of, well, the Cardinals broke him, they can't fix him. No, there's probably some of fault on the Cardinals in all of that, but some of it is the players have got to adjust.
In this scenario, they also rushed Victor Scott to the big league level, so there's some blame for the Cardinals in that regard as well, but it showed him the failures, and now he learns from it.
And I think when you see the best players is when they recognize, okay, I've got to do something that is going to, whether you want to say save my career or really help me take that next step. And sometimes it is just listening to the coaching staff. You know, you look at Victor Scott, it's listening to what Ryan Ludwig had told him and trying to move to this new approach. And what do you see? You see the results pay off to where he starts hitting the ball in AAA. And then he has his first big league home run. Alec Burleson had mentioned this, I think, at a winter warm-up prior to this season, where it was he talked with Turner Ward. Or he was basically kind of, you know, I've gotten to the big league level. You know, Turner Ward, he's a hitting coach. I don't necessarily have to listen to him. And then what happens is he listens to him. he starts saying, okay, yeah, there are things I can work on. I have gotten to the big leagues, but if I want to stay in the big leagues, I've got to do what they are telling me to do.
And for him, it wasn't a swing change. It was an approach change.
Yes.
It was, okay, what can I do damage on? What are the pitches that I need to be seeking? Because if I'm just swinging at everything, I'm not going to be able to do damage on a lot of these pitches. They're going to go low and away, and I'm just going to continue grounding out all the time. I need to be looking for the specific pitches that I can hit and do damage on, because I'm hitting everything. How do I get to my production? And that's what he said that he found during the offseason. Is he, like, after that injury last year, he said, I had to look within myself and find out, who am I going to be long term? And so we've got a few texts. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Somebody said, why can't Walker do what Victor Scott has done? And I think this is the important part of the conversation that Scott had with Ryan Ludwig, is it has to be the right time. It has to be the player that's willing to open themselves up to constructive criticism, coaching, and is willing to be coachable at that point in time. You have to meet them where they are. And for a lot of players, they're unwilling to do that because their swing, like, they have to take their career into their own hands to a degree. And if I'm going to listen to somebody else, I'm putting my trust, my faith in that person that this is going to work. Because if it doesn't, it's my career that's on the line, not theirs. And so if you're Jordan Walker, for example, and you are stubborn to the point that you believe in your swing, it's worked for you for your entire career, and it's going to work for you again, and it's going to unlock whatever the talent is inside of Jordan Walker. But for whatever reason right now, it's not, right? If you believe that in your heart of hearts, I don't care who talks to you, whether it's Ryan Ludwig or Jeff Albert or the current major league hitting coaches, like, it doesn't matter who talks to you. They're not going to be able to unlock your swing because it is your decision to do that. So that's what it comes down to, is it's got to be the player that is willing to listen to these coaches, that is willing to listen to this advice. Otherwise, you're never going to see the kinds of changes that we've seen here with Victor Scott. If Nolan Gorman is not going to change his approach at the plate, he's not going to be the player that the Cardinals need him to be. He's got to be willing to do that when you're striking out nearly 40% of the time at the major league level. Jordan Walker is hitting the ball on the ground too often. We've seen it change lately. I don't know if that's a swing change, an approach change, or if he's just getting better luck now. Whatever the reason, the production is starting to be there for Jordan Walker. You got to be able to open up your mind to these changes. Otherwise, it's never going to happen for them. It's on the player and the team sometimes. And I think sometimes we only put the credit and the blame on the team.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. And I think there are times where, like, when you have really established yourself, like when you're at the point of, Paul Goldschmidt's kind of a bad example because he's going through it this year, but when you're at the point of Paul Goldschmidt in his career, I can see where that player is a little bit more skeptical of taking in new coaching. But when you're a rookie and you've had the struggles at the big league level, like Victor Scott had, like you've seen Nolan Gorman have, like you've seen Jordan Walker have, the player at some point has to say, okay, what do I really need to work on? Because they get a ton of voices saying, both internally and externally most of the time. In the offseason, they're typically working with somebody else with their hitting swing. They've got to, as a young player, start to learn how to separate of, okay, this is what is going to help me, and here's what's not going to help me. And sometimes that takes trial runs as well. I think that's the one thing that you see the players really be hesitant of sometimes of, well, the Cardinals are telling me to do this potentially. Well, okay, I tried that for like a week, but it didn't work. Well, you got to continue to stay with that. You can't abandon what you've been working on the moment it doesn't work and revert back to what already wasn't working. That is one thing that seems to be occurring with the St. Louis Cardinals and their young hitters.
Do you think he can wally pipp Michael Siani, Victor Scott? Like, is there a scenario where he produces over the next, let's call it 6 weeks, to the point where when Michael Siani returns to the lineup or to the team, he is no longer your starting center fielder, and instead that is now Victor Scott's job, both for the now and for the future?
I think it's possible that he can, if his bat lives up to... Not so much if his defense is as good as Michael Siani's, and then his bat brings a little bit more pop to the table than what Siani says, because Siani has 2 home runs on the season. Victor Scott's already to 1, so he's already cut that in half. If he can show a little bit of offensive prowess and do a little bit of damage and slug a little bit and play as elite level defense as Michael Siani, I think he can wally pipp him. And Michael Siani then becomes like a potential late inning, bring him in and have him play a corner when you need to late in games as a defensive substitution.
Man, I think it's going to be hard for him too, because Michael Siani was so good when he was healthy. I think it all comes down to, is Michael Siani 100%? Because if Siani's 100%, I think he's probably your starting center fielder the rest of the way. I think Scott is your long-term answer at that position. But I think for the rest of this season, unless Scott does more of what we saw last night where he's hitting for real power, because I don't think he's going to hit for the average that we saw from Siani over the last month and a half or so. I think Siani just does so many things well. He's a great bunter, and people are going to laugh, but I do think that matters for this team at the bottom of the order. He's a guy that knows how to use his speed on the bases. I think Siani does all of the little things so well that he becomes more valuable in that role for this season than what Victor Scott can.
I do think another thing that will factor into their decision between Siani and Scott when they get to that is not so much the average, because you're right, he's probably not going to hit for that average, but is he getting on base? And then when he does get on base, can he help manufacture runs?
Because he had a pretty good walk rate down in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and he was doing really well before he got called up. 9 walks compared to 8 strikeouts in that 11-game stretch that we were referring to since like their kind of all-star break. I think if he's a guy that can find a way to get on base and then kind of help manufacture runs, kind of what we talked about early on where we were like dreaming, wow, what if it was a Billy Hamilton type season?
Yeah.
He can do that. This Cardinals team really needs help when it comes to manufacturing runs. He does that. He can become a bit of a difference maker and cause some havoc with pitching staffs having to worry about him on base. I think that also plays into his favor if he's able to get on base and play elite level defense.
Yeah. I think it would just take too much and too small of a sample size for him to be able to completely jump over him. I think it's probably going to go back to Michael Siani, and probably should go back to Michael Siani if he's fully healthy. With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, who is the player you're most excited to watch this season for your respective college football team? I'm going to eliminate Luther Burden from my consideration for the Missouri Tigers because he's the obvious answer. Other than Burden, though, who's the guy you're most excited to watch this season? We'll tell you our answers to that next here on 101 ESPN. So who's the player locally that you're most excited to watch this year in college football? With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. So the reason why I wanted to ask this question is because yesterday, The Athletic put out their freaks list. Now, if you're not familiar with this is something that Bruce Feldman puts out every single offseason. He goes through basically all of the different camps, and he talks to a bunch of different coaches across college football. And they give him like 2 or 3 different guys on their roster that are just putting up insane numbers, whether it's 40-yard dash or lifting wise, or these dudes that are like 6'7", 305 pounds that are just shit, like massive human beings, right? So it's the freaks list. And there was one player on it from Mizzou. There was another player on it from Illinois. Now, the Illinois guy was a running back. The Mizzou guy was an offensive tackle. So I don't know that there's a lot of people that are going to have Armand Mimbu, the Missouri right tackle from Lee Summit, Missouri, on their most exciting players to watch list. But he's likely an NFL caliber player. Could be a future like first or second round pick. He's a really, really good offensive tackle. But T-Bone, I'm going to give you the opportunity to start, because obviously Mizzou fans are excited about Luther Burden. You've got somebody that's gone a little under the radar with Illinois that might be worth keeping an eye on if you're a local college football fan.
Yeah, and that would be what I'm assuming is going to be their starting running back coming out of camp this year, their sophomore, Caden Fegan. This guy's freaking huge. You guys think Derrick Henry's big? He's bigger than Derrick Henry when Derrick Henry came out of college from Alabama. He's 6 pounds bigger than him. He's got a broad jump at 10 feet, 6.5 inches. He is a freak, and he clocked in a 20.3 mile per hour running speed on a 55-yard touchdown pass last season by the end of it. They didn't really kind of utilize him all that much early on in the season. He kind of started getting more reps towards the back half of last year, and he put up some solid numbers in the running game. But this is like the biggest commit that Bielema's gotten. He's the first in-state top 10 prospect to sign with Illinois since 2017 when they got him last year. But for the season, I think he's going to have a huge season. I don't think he's going to put up like Chase Brown numbers, but I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking about a 1,000-yard rusher. That's the kind of guy that is the identity for the Illini offense. And when he's that big and he shows off that kind of speed, he's going to be the kind of guy that's going to draw some national attention. I'm super excited to see him because he should actually have, this year, a legitimate role in the Illini offense.
Derrick Henry had a 37-inch vertical. This guy has a 39-inch vertical. Derrick Henry is like 6'3", 250. This guy is 6'3", 253. This is what Brett Bielema said about him to The Athletic. Quote, "We beat out Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Michigan on him, and I think they were recruiting him for other positions. I went to him and showed him 12 different running backs that have played for me and went on to the NFL and how they're all different sizes. He's freaky. He's awesome. He's a grounded kid. I think he's going to be special." You can say what you want about Brett Bielema. He doesn't talk like that about very many players within his program. I am now suddenly excited to see what he can do for the Illini this year, and they need a player like that to emerge. One of the big things that I think they lacked last year was like a legitimate playmaker from that position, because Chase Brown was special, man. That guy was an unbelievable football player. They won games 2 years ago because Chase Brown was just that good.
Yeah.
And then this year you go into it, you're like, okay, can somebody like that emerge for the Illini? Because that's the identity of a Brett Bielema offense. If this guy can become that, it really changes the outlook for them. Not like a 9 or a 10 win team, but maybe suddenly they become more watchable.
Bound.
Yeah, they become a more watchable offense this season.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be interesting with him is I still fear what the offensive line looks like, because last year I remember Bielema kept saying in training camp and all leading up to the season, we think we've got a pretty good offensive line. And then I watched that offensive line, and they were bad. So if they can't block for him, they're not going to be able to really maximize him. But when Brett Bielema says that quote that you just said, and then he also said, I'm looking for my IU, referring to Ayo Dosunmu, for his program, kind of trying to take that. We need a guy that is our identity, just like the Illini had him in the basketball program. Sure. That's why he's really targeted him, thinking, okay, this is the guy that I can kind of build around our success. Because all that team that he had success with, 2 years ago when they won 8 games or 9 games, that team really wasn't all guys recruited from him. He still kind of had some of the leftovers from taking over. This is the first guy that is, okay, this is a Bielema recruit that you can hopefully build momentum around and actually build a successful season around and have like an 8-win season.
All right, so for Mizzou, I mentioned Luther Burden is not available. We got to put him off to the side because Burden is the obvious answer as to who you're most excited to see this season for the Tigers. If I was to say somebody not named Burden, I'm going to his position. Wide receiver, Marquise Johnson. Second year in the program. Last season, if you don't remember what he was able to do, he had a 42-yard catch against Kansas State on a fake punt. He had a 76-yard touchdown against Memphis that ended up opening up that game for him. He had 3 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown against Vanderbilt, 2 catches for 45 against LSU, 2 for 45 against Kentucky, 2 for 55 against Tennessee, and had a 50-yard catch in the bowl game against Ohio State last year. He averaged 30 yards per reception a year ago for the Tigers. He had 13 catches and 3 of them went for touchdowns. When he touches the ball, it is electric. He is arguably the fastest player on the team, and when he's got the ball in his hands, I think he is the fastest guy on the team. They have a lot of receivers, like Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss Jr., Mekhi Miller played really well for them at times last year, had some big catches, especially in that Florida game down the stretch. Marquise Johnson is going to be a massive piece of this offense for this season and beyond. I think he is the internal replacement after Luther Burden is drafted next year for that position to be the guy in the offense. I think he's going to have a potential big season for them. I don't know what that means in terms of catches because there's just not enough. There's not enough to go around for 5 different receivers to have a monster season, but I think he's going to be a guy that has like 10 plays this season that completely change games. And he's, other than Luther Burden, really like the one guy that I can say that about. Yeah. So Marquise Johnson for me is the guy that I'm maybe most excited to watch other than Luther this season.
And you mentioned his speed. Like if you've got kind of a speedster like that, he probably isn't going to be the number one target to your point of a big target reception share, the big share of receptions. But you can always have little packages for that guy, whether it be like end arounds with him or just those like, hey, he gets that running start, boom, dump it off to him for a screen, try and get him out in space. We see NFL teams try and utilize that with some of the smaller receivers. The Rams are still trying it with Tutu Atwell, for example. But in the college game, it really works out. You know, you can really space out the field a little bit more.
He's not small. Like he's a pretty big dude for a guy as fast as he is. Typically, you expect him to be kind of built the way that Mookie Cooper is.
Yeah.
He's got a little bit more size than what you typically see out of those speedy wide receivers. So I'm super excited to be able to see him. I mean, there's 12 different players that I could mention on Missouri. A bunch of them on the defensive side of the ball, like transfers that have come in and are expected to replace big production from a year ago. But for me, Marquise Johnson would be right at the top of that list.
Here's one that I'm curious about because I don't really know, to be honest, outside of last year. But seeing what Cody Schrader did last year, what's going to be their running back situation this year?
It's really interesting. They've got 3 guys that are expected to be a part of like a timeshare, essentially. So they got Marcus Carroll, who's a guy that came in from, I want to say it's Georgia Southern, I think is where he was previously. Nate Noel, who was at Appalachian State previously. And then they've got 2 guys internally that could end up getting a little bit more of a share of it with Tavoris Jones and Jamal Roberts. I think Roberts is probably the favorite to get more of those carries. But Noel and Carroll are the 2 guys that they got from the transfer portal that should be getting a large chunk of those carries. I think it's going to be more of a 2-back committee than it has been in the past under Eli Drinkwitz. And I think that could be a good thing. Like, not everybody has to be Cody Schrader. Not everybody has to be Tyler Beatty. I think by the end of the season, they'll probably choose the guy that is better for them, and he'll get like 2 out of the 3 downs. But Carroll and Noel are 2 guys that I think are worth monitoring for Mizzou early in the season to see kind of how they fit into this offense. Because last year, I mean, Schrader was what made the offense go. Burden was amazing, but Schrader, think about that Tennessee game. He was the one that won them that football game and allowed it to be what it was. They also have a great offensive line, so that helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
It's fun to be a Tigers fan right now, man.
I just hope Illinois can get back to this level. All this talk about Missouri gets me so excited.
So ESPN.com did a great piece earlier today on the players that are the most important to determine this year's college football playoff race. There was one Tiger on the list. Unfortunately, Illinois was left off. I did not see any Illinois players that were listed.
Didn't even get an honorable mention.
Luther Burden came in at number 22 on this list. Feels a little low to me, but whatever. We'll go with it. I want to go through like the top 5 on this list, T-Bone, because I do think there's some interesting names that speak to where we're at right now with college football. So number 1, the most important player this year that will determine the outcome of the college football playoff. Former Kansas State quarterback that was pushed out of the program because they wanted to go with Avery Johnson, their young hotshot quarterback, one of the best recruits that they've ever had in the history of their program, Will Howard. Will Howard is now at Ohio State. He's expected to be their starting quarterback this season. Ohio State went into the portal and spent a boatload of money this offseason because they are all in on one season with Ryan Day, and if it doesn't work out, that dude is gone. Will Howard is their starter. They went big game hunting this offseason to get somebody that's a stud at the position. And what they came out with is essentially the college football equivalent of having, Brock Purdy as your starting quarterback.
Oh.
A legitimate game manager. Somebody that, he was fine. He was pretty good at Kansas State. They won a lot of games with him as their quarterback. And now he's expected to do the same thing at Ohio State. I find this situation to be fascinating, man, because typically when you've got a team as good as Ohio State is, with as much talent as they do, and as much pressure on their head coach as they have, you would expect them to have a really talented, big-time recruit that's emerging at the position. They don't have that. They've got Will Howard, who is a placeholder at the position. Not only is he important for this season and for the college football playoff, he's important for Ryan Day's job. I can't wait to see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how Ohio State played that quarterback position because they did kind of push out McCord, push out that recruit. We'll see, because I would think when you're Ohio State, you do like the idea of having somebody that is kind of that game manager that is, okay, odds are he's probably not going to cost us a game. That's what they had last year with Kyle McCord of, sure, you could dream on the ceiling, but you also knew
slightly better Kyle McCord.
Yeah, but you knew the floor was the floor is he could probably lose us a game as well. I don't think Will Howard's that, but I just don't know if he raises the ceiling for you to where, the expectation in Ohio State is not just make the college football playoff. It's to go out there and compete for a championship. And they're kind of stuck in that weird in-between to where, yeah, they got the quarterback that, sure, they should probably get to the college football playoff, but do they have the quarterback to exceed their expectations? I don't know if they do, because Will Howard, you're right, he's just a fine quarterback to have.
The other things on this list that I found to be really interesting, at number 2, they have Alex Orji, who is the starting quarterback for Michigan going into the season. He has 5 career passing yards. He has thrown 1 pass. It went 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. They also have a new head coach at Michigan this year. Jim Harbaugh is going to the NFL, and he ain't coming back to college football for a long time. He got a 4-year show cause earlier today, so he's not going to be a head coach in the college football sidelines for quite some time. That explains why he decided to go to the NFL this specific offseason. So Alex Orji, one guy to watch. Dylan Gabriel, previously with UCF and then with Oklahoma, is now with Oregon. He's at number 3 on this list. Jalen Milroe returns at Alabama as their quarterback at number 4.
That's the guy I'm interested in. And I don't think you've seen his full potential because their offensive line sucked last year.
One of my buddies is an Alabama fan, and he said, do you think he's got a little bit of Vince Young in him? I was like, I don't know, man. And then he had that game against, who was it, where he scored at the very end of it?
Was it Auburn?
I think it was the Auburn game. And I was like, that's it. That was the Vince Young moment. Maybe he does have a little bit of that in him. Drew Allar, the starting quarterback for the Penn State Nittany Lions, is also in the top 5. And then Jackson Dart at number 6, Garrett Nussmeier at number 7, and Cam Ward at number 8. The top 8 are all quarterbacks at significant, legit college football playoff hopefuls. It speaks to where we're at right now going into this season. Last year was a bunch of guys that are returning, same position, same team, previous production. This year, out of the guys that I mentioned, I think the only ones that are returning to their teams that were very good for them last year are Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe. And that's kind of it, man.
Won Cam Ward with Miami last year?
No, Cam Ward was with, was it Washington State, I believe?
Carolina Hurricanes.
What?
Huh?
He's a Stanley Cup champion, Cam Ward.
Oh.
He's now with the Miami Hurricanes. I thought you were I didn't know where you were going with that one. Yeah, Cam Ward was previously with Washington State, and before that, Incarnate Word. But he had a really good season last year with Washington State. So it's a fascinating year. Transfer portal officially off and running.
And the funny thing is when those guys transferred, one, I totally forgot Cam Ward even transferred. Yeah. But I remember when Will Howard transferred, those were the big name transfers. And now, you think back, as you said, the last year, all those guys, it was 2 years in the system. Bo Nix, you had DJ Uyunglele, who also transferred this year. Legit names that transferred in, you were confident, okay, Bo Nix, he can get Oregon to the college football playoff.
Bo Nix had been there. He had been there for a couple of years at that point in time. Last year, it was guys that are returning with previous production. Michael Penix. You look at the entire Pac-12, basically. It was guys that were in year 2 or 3 as established starters that have been there, done that with this core group of players around them. The one team that had a new quarterback in place was Georgia. And Carson Beck was pretty good last year, but I think you saw some of the pitfalls of that, of losing so much talent and inserting a new quarterback at the position. It's hard, man, and this is why there's so much excitement about Mizzou. Is they're one of the few teams that has that. They do have a quarterback that's returning with his core group of players around him once again going into this season. Mizzou, college football player for bust, baby. Coming up next, there was an interesting theory yesterday from Derek Gould in his chat on what would reinvigorate this fan base here in St. Louis. Do you guys have any ideas in that regard? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. I got to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health. They've helped me out, guys. I feel so much better on my runs now. So you guys know I'm a runner. I do a lot of half marathons in town. And I've noticed over the last couple of years, really, since having Luca, I don't have the same energy on my runs. And so I reached out to them. I booked an appointment online. VictoryMen'sHealth.com is the place where you can go to do that. And I said, hey, is there anything you guys can help me out with in this regard? They said, well, we're going to find out where your levels are at. We'll find out where your testosterone levels are at and some of your vitamin levels. And they found out I'm pretty low on my vitamin B12, and that has a potential consequence of not having the same amount of energy. So they've helped me out with a supplement there. I also got a new multivitamin from them, and they've got me a vitamin D supplement as well. Whether it's weight loss goals, low testosterone, erectile dysfunction, they can help you to unlock your inner champion. They've done that for me. I actually have an appointment with them later on this afternoon to find out where my micronutrient levels are. They can do all of that for you at Victory Men's Health. 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and check them out today at VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
Grit Francis here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, the Cardinals escaped with a win after they took down the Rays 4-3. 2 two-run home runs led the Cardinals to victory. First from Victor Scott, then from Tommy Pham, both coming in the second inning. And then Sonny Gray had a good outing. 7 innings pitched, 4 hits allowed. The only 2 earned runs against him was a 2-run home run in the first inning. Tonight, the Cardinals look to build on that as they are back with the Rays tonight for Game 2 of of that series. It'll be Eric Fetty's second start for the Cardinals, hoping for his first win, going up against Taj Bradley for the Rays. First pitch will be at 6:45. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
All right, so what kind of moves this offseason would reinvigorate a Cardinals fan base that has lost hope, honestly, in some of what the Cardinals front office has done with Tanner and Grant on BK? This is what Derek Gould wrote the other day in his chat. Quote, the Cardinals stated that they pushed to make a deal for Nolan Arenado to excite the Cardinals fan base and to show that they could still do the big addition. But did it spur interest? It's so hard to tell with people being mad online. The Cardinals believed that signing Sonny Gray to the largest free agent deal ever for them was going to be a thrill for the fan base as well. Did it? Again, hard to tell because there's anger everywhere on Twitter, but his starts aren't seen as a big bounce in terms of the walk-up crowds. If anything, what the Cardinals have learned about exciting the fan base is that nostalgia works. Nothing moved tickets more than the pursuit of 700, right? But does that improve the team? I think it's a fascinating topic for conversation on what kind of moves do excite this fan base. Are there any? A Juan Soto mega deal? Maybe that would, but probably for only about 48 hours, and then there would be complaints about the pitching again. Again, that all comes from Derek Gould in his chat over on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website. So it comes back to the question of what is it about the Cardinals that interests you? Like, what is it that would reinvigorate this fan base? And T-Bone, this gets into like a million different conversations about the TV deal and how people aren't being able to watch the games right now and what kind of baseball people want to watch philosophically. Like, is it about getting back to running? Is it about just, hey, win 100 games and we'll get back out to the ballpark? Is it about having stars that are homegrown? Like, there's a million different things, and all of them apply to different portions of the fan base. There is no carte blanche, like, do this, and you've got everybody back on board. But when you hear that from Derek Gould, what is it that could reinvigorate this fan base? Is there a move that could be done, whether it's in the offseason, trade, free agency, whatever, that gets people back on board? Is there anything that immediately comes to mind for you?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind when I see that is, I would push back and say that the fan base was excited when they got Nolan Arenado of the, hey, look, they just acquired a star. And it was a guy that we had talked about for a whole offseason. And I think attendance, for the most part, pretty much showed like, hey, Cardinals fans were invested into that team. And then you got them 2022. Why were they invested? Not so much the Arenado impact, but you had the Albert Pujols and Nostalgia Act. I don't think there is a Nostalgia Act for them to go after anymore. Like, that angle's kind of gone until you have some homegrown talent that comes up and just plays for like 20 years with the organization.
By the way, the Albert thing worked because he was producing.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah.
Like, that was a big piece of that. Yes, the chase for 700 was big, but also the team was pretty good, and he was playing as well as he has since 2011. Like, he became, like, if you were just doing first half, second half MVPs, he would have been in the MVP conversation for the second half of that season. So that's also a key part of that. I don't think it was just nostalgia. It was, oh my God, I'm watching the old version of Albert Pujols again. I remember watching this. I remember what this felt like when he steps to the plate in 2007 or 2011. This is what I remember from when I was 16 years old, and now I'm, 30 watching this again.
And what was that? That was a superstar, playing like a superstar.
That's a good point.
I think that's what they're missing. I think they're missing the superstars. I think that's what draws people to the ballpark. I think some of this year where the attendance is down is, I think everybody saw their offseason and was like, really? This is what they did to improve upon a 91-loss team? And a lot of that goes to the pitching side of things. I think again, we talked about it, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Nobody predicted both Goldie and Arenado falling off a cliff. You probably had maybe one of them, probably Goldschmidt because he's older, but not both of them. But I don't think, like, when you look at what they did in the offseason, we talked about it at the time, it wasn't sexy at all. Like, what they did was they marginally improved the rotation. And when I say that, I mean, look at the numbers. They're still near the bottom in a lot of statistical categories with their starting pitching staff. And I don't think Sonny Gray was a ace viewed across, as a baseball fan base, I don't think baseball fans viewed Sonny Gray as an ace. I think they always viewed him as a 2. So I don't know why the Cardinals would have thought the process of, oh, well, if we sign Sonny Gray, this is a guy that's going to draw people to the ballpark.
We could have told them that from our conversations on the air about Sonny Gray prior. Like, this was in September because the team was done. So we talked about Sonny Gray starting, like, at the end of their season. We could have told them pretty easily, this is not going to be viewed as as significant of addition as it really is.
Yeah, and though it is a good addition, I think it was kind of the blinders were on for the Cardinals. You know, they weren't actually listening to the fan base and saying, okay, yeah, Sonny Gray, that's still number 1 in our opinion. Well, that's not what the fan base wants. What the fan base wants is they want to see the big splash. They want to go see, and I don't know if he was available on the market this year for them, in terms of acquiring an ace that probably would have fit into their plans. Like, I don't think Blake Snell would have been this guy. I'm not sure that guy was there for the starting pitching market. But when those guys become available, that's what they need to be going after. They need to be going after the true aces that people look at. Aaron Nola, that's probably the one, even though he was going to sign with Philly.
I think there would have been a portion of the fan base that was like, ooh, this is scary. But also a portion of the fan base that if you sign Snell and Sonny Gray and don't do the other 2 additions that they had, I think there would have been a decent portion of the Cardinals fan base that's like, all right, that's a real front end of the rotation, and maybe you're not like reinvigorated, but I think that would have done more for you in terms of the good graces of fans than what they did. But ultimately, all of this comes back to winning, and not just like being an 87 win team. I think a lot of it comes down to Cardinals fans believe the Cardinals should be going for a World Series. And I don't remember when this happened specifically. I can't put my finger on it, but there came a point in time where the Cardinals stopped talking about winning World Series and started talking about winning the division. And I think there's a disconnect there. And I remember when Ollie Marmol was put in charge of being the manager of the Cardinals, one of the first things that he did was said, anything less than a World Series is not seen as a success here. And I was like, oh my God, finally somebody's saying it. And then he went into spring training the next year and made it very clear. Our goal is to win the World Series.
And Mo quickly walked it back.
Correct. I was like, this is refreshing. The Cardinals are once again talking about not just like winning 90 games, getting in and seeing what happens when you get there. They're talking about winning the final game of the season the way that only one team does. And that should be the aspiration from this team. And it certainly is the aspiration from this fan base. And so to me, like, a big part of it is not only saying those things, which they don't do in the front office, but also backing it up with your moves. Like, the Cardinals' moves in the offseason back up the idea of them being an 86-win team. And then they go into the season and they tell you, we hope we get into the playoffs and win the division, and then we'll see what happens when we get there. And, like, I think Cardinals fans are just kind of sick of it. I don't think they want that to be the mindset of the organization. So I think it's, to use their own terms, a philosophical difference between the fan base and the way that the team operates from an ownership level all the way down of winning 86 to 90 games is good enough. And I don't think Cardinals fans view it as being good enough any longer.
Yeah, and I think that ties into what we're talking about when it goes to, like, the mid-tier free agents. Like, we always talk about, the Cardinals should go out and sign a Blake Snell, or they should go out and try and sign an Aaron Nola. Well, what do? They settle for the mid-tier, don't want to spend the big dollar figure, which I do think is one thing that Cardinals fans want to see this team do.
They like stars. Stars play in this market.
Exactly.
Stars play everywhere, but especially in this market. Think back to what they have been in the early 2000s, back in the 80s, 98, like the 60s, when this team is really resonating with the fan base. They've got future Hall of Famers littered across the roster, right? Like, you look back at the early 2000s, it was MV3, but also let's plug in Larry Walker into the middle of this lineup. Oh, we had a down year? Well, let's go get Matt Holliday, who's one of the best hitters of this generation. Like, that is what Cardinals fans want. And right now, that's not what they do. They go get Matt Carpenter at the end of his career, or Brandon Crawford at the end of his career. That's not what Cardinals fans know.
And I wonder if some of this plays into, because you mentioned those trades, Matt Holliday. You gave up, like, significant assets to go get Matt Holliday. They gave up, I think, one of their top prospects who ended up flaming out, Brett Wallace, at the time. Yep. You mentioned Larry Walker. Like, they gave up significant assets to go get a Larry Walker to try and improve that team. I think a lot of people, when they look at the Goldie Arnau trade, though, yes, they do like those stars that they were able to go out and get. They were also, like, easy trades to make when you think about it. Sure, Arnau was complicated with all the money that was going in and out. They gave up nothing in the Arnau deal. Same with the Paul Gold. They gave up Carson Kelly, who's barely sticking around Major League Baseball, and Luke Weaver, who's barely sticking around baseball. And at the time, like, everybody in St. Louis was like, oh, you didn't really give up anything for Paul Goldschmidt. Whether you want to call that a fleece or you want to say, well, Mo just had better leverage and was able to make those kind of moves. I think they want to see a big swing, whether that's in free agency or saying, you know what, we've got this guy named Jordan Walker. Let's go get that Garrett Crochet.
I think two things happened that ended up being kind of like problematic for the way that this team approaches things. Really three things. One, 2011. And the reason why is because in 2011, you had a team that won 90 games, finished second in the division, and went on this special run to win the World Series, right? And then in 2013 and 2015, you lost the World Series in 13 with a 97-win fantastic baseball team. That was as well constructed as you can make without like that Albert Pujols level superstar on it. The 2015, you win 100 games and lose in the NLDS, and then that was like the end of that run. So you look back and you're like, okay, well, 2011 was the most successful of those teams, and they just got hot at the right time. So now you have this philosophy of, well, we can just get hot at the right time. And then beyond that, you make the big move where you go out and get Marcell Ozuna, and it backfires in a huge way. And I think that made them a little gun shy to make those big moves. And then beyond that, they have the Randy Arozarena, Adolis Garcia. Guys go elsewhere and have all of this success, which means that they want to just hold on to all of their assets until it's too long. And so all of these things start to pile up, and you're just second guessing basically every decision that you could possibly make, and then you just end up, it's a stalemate for you. And you just sit here and you're like, okay, we're going to be super conservative, and we're going to try to win 86 games, and we're going to get into we're going to get into the playoffs, and maybe we'll have a chance at the World Series. Like, that's the way that they seem to have operated basically since 2016. And that's not the way to go about it.
Not to cut you off, but to add on to that, the fact that last year the Texas Rangers won the World Series, the Arizona Diamondbacks backed their way into the World Series. The Phillies 2 years ago were up against you in the wild card. They got into the World Series. Like, the fact that that has been the trend the past couple of years is just even more so reinforcing their idea. And by the way, I wouldn't be shocked if the Diamondbacks did it again this year. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if this happens again. It just even furthermore reinforces their idea. And I like just looking at the text line right now, I think that mindset is what is so much frustrating for this fan base.
I think it requires new leadership at the top. And like, I think that Mo is better at his job than people give him credit for. And I know that our text line is going to light me up for that. But I think there comes a point in time where you just need a new voice. You need some fresh new ideas. And I think we've arrived there. And I think Mo sees that, and that's part of why he's going to step down in the next couple of seasons. But until that happens, I don't think there's anything Mo can do this offseason that's going to completely get the Cardinals fans back on board. I think it requires a fresh start and then like a cycle of seeing moves that Cardinals fans get behind and work out. It's not going to be an easy thing for this team to be able to accomplish. All right, coming up next, let's dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. dive into the junk drawer with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. So I'm going to do this, and it's out of love. I do this out of love for our guys on the Fast Lane, okay?
Oh.
Were you guys listening to the Fast Lane Sports Six-Pack yesterday?
I was not. I did not hear that.
Did you hear it yesterday, Grant? It's okay if you didn't. It's around 4, I think it was like 4:30 was when they did the Sports Six-Pack yesterday.
I believe I listened to that part, but nothing stood out to me that I recall.
Did you hear the end of their first Sports Six-Pack segment? Because they've got two segments of the Sports Six-Pack that they typically do. Because at the end of it, they asked a question about how are you going to remember Billy Beane? And,
I did not hear this.
Okay. So Billy Beane, guy that they were talking about, was the man that was featured prominently, right, in Moneyball. And so they both said, like, hey, I'm going to remember Billy Beane as either the hero or the villain, depending on your perspective of analytics, and everything that has meant in the last, 25 years for Major League Baseball. Completely changed the game. Everything about the way that we consume baseball today is different because of Billy Beane. And the reason why they did this is because Billy Beane passed away yesterday at the age of 60. So they wanted to memorialize the man, right? And then the text started pouring in. Billy Beane did indeed pass away yesterday at the age of 60. Billy Beane, who in 1999 became the second major league player to come out as gay and later became the sport's senior vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. He was 60 years old. This is not the same Billy Beane who was prominently featured with the Oakland Athletics as part of Moneyball. So in other words, they got the wrong guy. Now, we've all done this, right? Billy Beane, this one has no E at the end of his name. Billy Beane, the other one, does. B-E-A-N-E is the one that they were looking for that operates and is I think, special advisor now to the ownership group out in Oakland.
Yeah.
Woof! Listen, I'm the one that asked Jamie. This was a few years ago now when it was Rivs and BK. We're doing the show together, and Jamie has all these great Jimmy Roberts stories. I said, Jamie, we should get him on sometime. He said, well, I think that's going to be a little difficult, BK. And I said, what happened? He said, Jimmy Roberts has passed away some time ago. I was like, well, don't think we're going to be able to do that one. So they unfortunately killed Billy Beane, the one that is...
Well...
best known for his work with the Oakland Athletics yesterday.
To defend those guys a little bit, I fell for that too when I got the notification because my phone blew up of, ESPN breaking news, and I was like, man, Billy Beane of Moneyball died?
I think we all had the exact same response originally when we saw the news.
And then when I started reading more of it, I was like, wait, I don't think he worked for Major League Baseball. I thought he was with the Athletics. So you know what? I can see the honest mistake that happened there. It gets the best of us.
It's totally understandable, and if you just saw the news, saw the headline, and you didn't, go into the story, and this was moments after the news broke, so there would have been no way for them to be able to do so. They reacted to it live on the air.
Can we be honest? The person that probably sent that text probably knew what they were doing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. What's your guys' thoughts on Billy Beane passing away? They knew what they were doing. Send that in. Everybody just sees a name, immediately kind of react to it.
I felt for them. I was like, oh man. Is not going the way that they expected it to. So they opened up the next segment and said, we apologize. We killed the wrong Billy Beane. R.I.P. to this Billy Beane. The other Billy Beane very much still with us, thriving, and as a member of the now Oakland Athletics, soon to be Las Vegas Athletics.
They'll always have on us that they never got a fake Ryan Braun on.
That's true.
We're the only ones who have managed to get the wrong person on the airwaves for a solid 5 minutes.
In 15 minutes, we're going to get into a game of more likely to happen. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. But next, this is the stretch where the Cardinals offense should take off. We'll tell you why next here on 101 ESPN. With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. So this should be the time when the Cardinals offense really takes off in a meaningful way. T-Bone, this is a very left-handed heavy offense. We know that, and it's why they're struggling so much against left-handed pitching. They just went through a stretch where eight out of the last 13 games, they've gone up against lefty starters. That is exactly the stretch of games where I would expect the Cardinals offense to struggle, and they didn't help themselves because they continued to have this roster misallocation of resources. They've got right-handed bats down in the minors that could potentially help them. Now, we don't know if they could help them because they won't call them up. But Ivan Herrera is a right-handed bat. He could potentially help you, and then you don't have to start Pedro Pages in all 8 of those games against left-handed starters. But I digress. They could have brought up a guy like Thomas Sajaci, made the 40-man move. He's played shortstop a decent bit down in AAA. It's not super great, but he can play the position capably. And DFA a guy like Brandon Crawford, who has, I think, 1 start since the All-Star break, if I'm not mistaken. He has like 5 plate appearances since the All-Star break. He's basically just sitting on the bench every day. Matt Carpenter's another guy that I don't think they're going to DFA. I'm not even sure they should, but that's a roster spot you could maneuver with if you really wanted to. But they chose not to, so they struggled against lefties. There was apparently, according to them, no way that they could have changed that. Now they're about to get in a significant stretch of games. I think it's 6 of their next 7, T-Bone, that are against right-handed starters. Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar, Alec Burleson, Victor Scott, the 2 other guys that I just mentioned, and Crawford and Carpenter, if they ever are able to crack this lineup. That's 7 bats from the left side on your current 26-man roster that should be able to do some damage now over the course of the next couple of weeks. Do you think they will?
I'm skeptical because it certainly feels a lot like early on in the year where we were talking a lot about, well, this team, they can't be this bad. They're all going through it at the same time. It kind of feels like that again, to where they're all struggling at the same time, and it's why you're seeing the lackluster offense. And maybe it's just because they face lefties, and we've talked about this before. Alec Burleson's been fantastic this season. He has not hit left-handed pitching well at all.
It's been terrible. He's the worst one on the team.
So maybe that's what's playing into my feeling of, all these guys are struggling at the same time. Maybe that's it. Maybe you're seeing that from him, Lars Nootbaar. Well, Gorman's always struggled this year, but those guys have significantly had splits this year. So maybe this is that stretch. But I'm just worried that you're seeing this Cardinals team go back through that same issue that we saw early on, where we know that batters go through streaks. They go through 2-3 week stretches where they're hot. They go through 2-3 weeks of stretches where they're hot or cold. My fear is that you're seeing a lot of these guys in that stretch right now. But this should be where they can really construct the lineup, where you can actually move Goldie and Arenado down. So you're not getting them in those higher leverage spots that we talked about earlier in the show, where they've really significantly struggled with runners in scoring position. You are right. I'm skeptical that this is the moment where they turn around, but this should be where they do it. This should be where they can kind of get a little bit of that mojo back in that offensive room and say, okay, now we're starting to hit the ball. Now it just comes down to, can our rotation hold up during this stretch?
The Cardinals in the second half of the season against right-handed pitching are they have a 675 OPS, 8% below league average offensively. This is as a team. That is 21st in Major League Baseball. So they haven't been able to do what they did in the first half against righties so far in the second half. But over the next 8 games, 7 of them are against right-handed pitchers, at least as of the way that they're currently scheduled to be formatted. The only lefty that they're expected to see between now and August 17th is Andrew Abbott. It's the one lefty starter that is currently slated against this Cardinals offense. And Burleson has been going through it lately. Donovan's had a really tough stretch lately. A lot of that, I do believe, is because of the left-handed pitchers that they're seeing. You want those guys in your lineup, but it really puts you behind the 8 ball when they're going up against lefty starters. Gorman, maybe this is a stretch where he can take advantage. I want to see Gorman in the lineup almost every day between now and August 17th, because right-handers are where he should be able to do the damage. And if it's going to happen for him, this is the stretch where it will happen for him. I want to see him in the lineup regularly. If that's at second base or DH, I don't care, honestly. But he's a guy that needs to be out there regularly. I am very skeptical on if this offense can be what we all wanted it to be, or what I certainly expected it to be this season. But if they're going to, this is the stretch where it should happen for them.
In this stretch, I think we talked about this yesterday. I can't remember. I know we had talked about it in the office. The stretch isn't on Goldie and Arenado to get it figured out. I don't think they're no longer the pillars for the offense. No. It's on those lefty bats that you're just talking about. Alec Burleson, been going through it. Why have we seen the Cardinals struggle? Well, because Burley's not hitting right now. Neither is Wilson Contreras, but I think it's these left-handed bats that are the ones you're really going to have to see. You've got to see Burley, got to see Nootbaar, got to see Donovan. If those three guys start to hit in this stretch, then you're going to feel good about the offense when you get to that August 17th mark where they've had the 6 of 7 or 7 of 8 against right-handed pitchers. Then you'll look at the Cardinals schedule, and I would bet you say, okay, look, they were about either 500 or they were better in that stretch because they got their left-handed bats going.
All right. So now we got to have a quick conversation about Nolan Gorman. Because last year, Nolan Gorman slugged .478 and had an .800 OPS against right-handed pitching. He hit 23 homers against them, was 16% above league average offensively against right-handed pitching. This year, he's below league average offensively against righties. He's got a .700 OPS so far this season, and he's striking out basically 1 out of every 2 times that he goes up to the plate against them. It's not good enough. And if you look at it on the season, he's now up to a near 38% strikeout rate. Now, for context on just how bad that is, the only players with as many plate appearances in a season as Gorman has currently, which is 350, to strike out this often since 1900, I think it is. Patrick Wisdom in 2021, Joey Gallo in 2022, Chris Davis in 2019, and Melvin Nevis. I'm not familiar with his work, but he struck out a ton. It happened in 1997. That's it. That's the company that Nolan Gorman is currently keeping. And the entire list of everyday players over the last decade that strike out at this kind of a rate are basically Joey Gallo, Mike Zunino, Chris Davis, and Miguel Sano. Again, not the company that you want to be keeping if you're Nolan Gorman. I'm still optimistic about him long term. I still believe he can be that power hitter that they've craved. Left side power bats at this age don't produce the way that Gorman did last year and typically become bad players after that. It has happened, though, for Gorman. Is this it? Is this what Nolan Gorman is going to be? Because if it is, dude, this is not a guy that you should be building your roster around. This is a guy that you should be looking to get out from underneath as quickly as possible because the asset is going to depreciate quickly.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder if this is who Nolan Gorman is. And I typically had been a little bit higher on him because we talked earlier in the show about Victor Scott and his ability to kind of adjust, making his adjustments. Early on in the career, you saw that from Nolan Gorman. But for some reason, you're not seeing that this year. And the concern for me is I know he's going to have valleys in his season. And the full 162, you're going to go through the valleys where he is going to strike out like 15 to 20 plate appearances. And I know that is in his game. You're still seeing that in his game this year. And the alarming part is it's at a worser rate than what it has been in the past, and I don't think his peaks have been as high. We've talked about it where you typically go through a month where Nolan Gorman's really bad and strikes out a lot, but then you really get that full month, and it's like, whoa, that guy carried our offense for a month. He had an OPS above 900, maybe even 1,000, and then you go back into that cold stretch. The problem for Nolan Gorman this year is I feel like his valleys have gotten worse in terms of the strikeouts, and the numbers back that up, and I don't think you've seen those high peaks. He only goes on a week stretch where you're like, okay, maybe we're getting ready to go through that month-long run, but then it disappears, and it's gone just like that as fast as it got there. So I think he's a guy, and I've been bullish on, hey, you need that kind of power to win in October. I think he's a guy I'm looking to trade in the offseason.
He's whiffing at 48% of the breaking balls that he swings at this year. 48%. Basically, every time that he swings, there's a 50-50 proposition that he's going to swing through the pitch. That's just unacceptable, man. You can't have success when you're swinging and missing that often. There's a certain amount of strikeouts that I'm willing to live with because if you do damage, hey, man, you live with what ends up coming with that. This year, this is an unacceptable level of strikeout rate for Nolan Gorman. I would like to see him for the next week play basically every single day. And then if he no longer is producing at that point in time, I think you got to make the decision to send him down to AAA to figure some things out. Because if he continues struggling the way that he has, he's just not going to get any more at-bats after the upcoming week or so. And he's a big part of why the offense should get back on track over the next week.
And his spot's an easy one to look at and say, oh, who plays infield that's right-handed that's hitting? Boom. Thomas Ajayci.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, is going to join us in about 15 minutes, but we're going to get to a game of more likely to happen at 314-399-9646. That's next here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us two scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. T-Bone, let's start out with this. More likely to be on the Cardinals in 2025. Paul Goldschmidt or Nolan Gorman?
Oh, I like that one. I will say, I can't believe I'm here, Paul Goldschmidt. I could see the Cardinals doing the Cardinals thing and saying legacy player, even though I totally disagree with it, and that they bring him back. And whether he's the starting first baseman or because of what we've talked about, we just talked about Alec Burleson struggles with lefty. If Goldie's willing to buy into being a platoon bat with Burley at first, I can see how you convince yourself of that. I just think now is the time where you capitalize on Nolan Gorman. You say, okay, his value's not as high as it was after last season, but it's also not as low as it has been like with Carlson and O'Neill when they had to sell low. I would say Gorman should be a trade piece this offseason, so I would say it's more likely Goldie's here next year.
I'm with you. I don't like it, but I think it will be Goldie, and I think just given how they're not really utilizing Gorman right now, and when they do, Gorman's not really taking advantage of it. Like, you are at a point where you have to do something, and that something is probably going to end up in trading him. So I think it probably is more likely that it's Goldie.
Man, I'm going to stick to my guns here. I think it's more likely that it ends up being Nolan Gorman on the roster next year.
Hope you're right.
Paul Goldschmidt. Absolutely. This is hope as much as it is belief. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
More likely to repeat their breakout season next year, Mason Wynn or Alec Burleson? Just so we're clear, I'm not out on either of those players.
Yeah. I'm going to say Alec Burleson just because, like, I trust the way that he goes about it probably more. But that being said, I think both are prone to slumps.
Yeah.
Mason Wynn doesn't hit the ball super hard regularly. But I also think he just knows who he is as a hitter. And I think sometimes we get into this mode where, like, we go over to Baseball Savant and we say blue bad, red good, right? Hit the ball harder more often, that's good. Hit the ball softer more often, that's bad. There's some truth to that overall, but I think there are certain batted ball profiles that you look at, like Luis Ariz. You go over to his Baseball Savant page from previous season. It's not super impressive, but he's the best hitter in the sport right now. So, at least best contact hitter in the sport. Some guys just know their swing and know how to put the ball in play the right way. I think that's what Mason Wynn is right now. So I'm not out on him at all, but Alec Burleson is like the exact type of hitter profile that I want on my team. So I'll say Alec Burleson more likely.
I think I'm going to say Mason Wynn. I think he's been pretty consistent this season. Burleson has been too, but the thing with Burleson is that if he starts going through slumps, like if Mason Wynn goes through slumps, you're probably going to still keep him in the lineup because of how good he is at shortstop. And while Burleson hasn't been bad in the outfield, like he's replaceable in the outfield. So if he goes through slumps with his bat, like that's why you have him in the lineup. With Mason Wynn, you have him in the lineup for two reasons: his bat and, almost more importantly, his defense at shortstop. So I'd say Mason Wynn.
Yeah, I think I would probably say Alec Burleson, and BK just kind of poo-pooed on my idea, but it's because I think he hits the ball harder. So I think he's a little bit more susceptible to avoiding bad luck, if that makes any sense. You know, with Mason Wynn, doesn't necessarily hit the ball hard. So sometimes some of these like soft line drive singles, well, maybe you don't lift it up enough, or you get on top of the ball a little bit more, or you don't beat out an infield single.
The reason I'm not too worried about it is because he doesn't whiff or strike out.
Yeah.
When you have guys that do not have a good batted ball profile and they strike out, there's just so little margin for error from them. It's also why I'm going with Burleson. He doesn't strike out, like, ever.
Yeah.
So you can live with the ups and the downs of the batted ball luck over time.
And one thing that I don't want to say it worries me, because I actually am very high. I said this on Monday. I think Wynn can end up becoming like a 15, 20 homer guy. Is he's now starting to try and do what Burleson did, which was the approach, which is, okay, early on, I'm going to swing for the fences if I get the pitch that I like. So now maybe next year is kind of a learning curve year of, oh boy, pitchers are actually doing this a little bit differently from last year. I'm still very high on both guys. I just think it's more likely it's Alec Burleson.
Okay, for mine, very hypothetical at this point. If the Cardinals make the playoffs,
okay,
who do you think would have a big moment? Nolan Gorman or Nolan Arenado?
Gorman. There's more right-handed pitchers, which means that there's going to be more opportunities for him to do damage, and I think he's more likely to do damage, and I think damage is what creates a big moment in the postseason. Nolan Arenado, the way that he has a big moment in the postseason most likely is defensively. Nolan Gorman can have that big moment like Juan Yepes, where he completely changes the game in one swing of the bat. It could even be coming off of the bench against a big-time right-handed pitcher. Now, he's ineligible to do that because they probably go to Crawford instead. But if they went to him, he's the kind of guy that can do damage, and that's how you have a moment. So I'm going to go Nolan Gorman.
I'm with BK. I would say more likely Gorman because he's the guy that can still do damage. I
like the question, though.
Yeah, I don't. Arenado, like, maybe he could come through with, like, a bloop single. Like, that's kind of what he's been doing. He's sitting for a decent average with runners in scoring position, but nobody remembers a single unless it's like Lance Berkman's in 2011 where it's the final strike in the 10th inning to tie the game of the World Series. So I would say it's more likely Nolan Gorman because we still remember Juan Yepes' home run on a team that got bounced in the wild card round.
That was a big moment, dude. That place was rocking after that home run by Juan Yepes, and it should have been a signature moment for that season, and unfortunately what happened later in that game ended up being what we remember.
How sad is it, though, that if you would have heard this conversation 2 years ago when we're talking who's more likely to have a big moment, Nolan Arenado or Nolan Gorman, and the answer is not Nolan Arenado, like,
it's frustrating. It's why the season is where it's at right now.
Yeah.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us two scenarios. We tell you which one is more likely here on 101 ESPN. More likely, the Cardinals have more wins or the Blues have more points this season?
Oh, because I can see the Blues. I think
What'd they finish with last year?
I was just about to say
92 points last year.
And I think what was the
Wild were at 87 right behind them.
Yeah, because I think that's kind of the range they're going to be more at this year's 87.
I'll say the Blues.
I think I will, too.
I think it's going to be hard for the Cardinals to get to 87 plus.
Yeah, and that's alarming because Tommy Pham says they need 86 to make the playoffs.
I think it could be lower than that. I think you could potentially win this division with fewer than 87.
Maybe. I'll take the Blues as well. I can see them being like an 87-point team. I think the Cardinals right now are like an 82 to 85 win team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think the Blues are going to be great by any means next year, but I think they're going to be just about how they were last season. I don't see them taking a step back. So, yeah, I'll go Blues there.
More likely, the Cardinals will have a pitcher throw a complete game or a no-hitter this season. More likely a complete game.
Well, nobody's allowed to throw that many innings, BK. I was shocked Gray got the 7th inning last night.
I was happy to see that, by the way.
I was too, especially because it was near the bottom of the order for Tampa Bay. I'll say more likely complete game. No hitters. Even Framber Valdez, whose stuff was awesome last night, hung one slider, and Corey Sears said, yeah, no, you're going to finish one out short.
The last one here. More likely, the Cardinals or Mizzou football make it to the second round of their respective playoffs. So the Cardinals make it to the NLDS, or Mizzou football makes it to the second round of the college football playoff. Mizzou for me.
Well, you got to get there first.
They got it. It's already in the bag.
Yeah.
I'm
going Mizzou.
I can't believe I'm here, and I hate that this is about to come out of my mouth. I think it's Mizzou, and the only reason for it is because I don't think the Cardinals are a playoff team, so I'd say the Missouri Tigers.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. How's that feel? That feels good, right?
No.
You can feel it building, the anticipation, the excitement. Like I can almost hear Hughes singing the fight song and saying MIZZOU.
Was there even a text for that, or did you just bring that up for that reason?
Oh, did you just make that up on the fly?
Listen, man, I'm not giving away our secrets. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. We're also going to be giving away a pair of tickets to see Green Day. Pair of lawn seats to see Green Day with special guest Rancid next Thursday, August 15th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. You will have to be watching the YouTube stream, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. If you are watching that in the next segment as we're talking to Chris Kerber, you're going to have an opportunity to be able to go home with a pair of tickets to see Green Day with special guest Rancid. So go ahead, stay tuned for that. We're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, look, when it comes to taking care of your HVAC unit, your air conditioner, your heating unit for the winter, you know that when repairs happen, it just doesn't make you happy. And from time to time, they're just going to have to be replaced. Well, when they do, think of the folks at Classic Air Care. I've been talking about them for a while. You can check out their Google reviews. Their 4.8 rating with all the Google reviews they have, you can get that at their website at classicaircare.com. But if your unit is old enough and you've been thinking about replacing it, I'm going to emphasize to you now's the time to call them and do it. And here's why. There are regulations that are changing from a government standpoint that are actually making some units obsolete. And what that's going to do is when the newer units come in, there's going to be a 10 to 15% higher cost on those units. We all know what's going on with the economy. We all know what's going on with the cost of living. And that is happening in every single aspect of our lives. So how do you do that? Plan ahead. Pay less today. If you are in the market for a new air conditioning unit or your furnace is going to need to be replaced for winter, now is the time to get it scheduled and get on while the inventory is there before prices do go up. You can get all the information at classicaircare.com, and you can also call them, and they'll take the phone call directly as well. They're good people. They will make your home comfortable. They've been making people comfortable since 1926. It's Classic Air Care.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Cardinals eked out a win 4-3 over the Rays in that series opener. They did so hitting two two-run home runs in the second inning, first from Victor Scott, then from Tommy Pham. And Sonny Gray had a good outing in his start. 7 innings, 4 hits allowed, and only 2 earned runs against. That was a 2-run home run in the first inning. He was strong after that. Tonight, the Cardinals will look to continue their success against the Rays, as it'll be Eric Fetty in his second start for the Cardinals, hoping for his first win against Taj Bradley of the Rays. First pitch from Busch Stadium will be at 6:45. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update has been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex Ferrario out today. He's on paternity leave. He'll be back in with us next week. But who is with us right now is Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He's joining us via the 101 ESPN hotline. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
BK, doing well. How are you?
Doing very well. So we're about, 6 weeks away now from the start of training camp for the St. Louis Blues. And this is kind of the anticipation period. The offseason is more or less done, and now we're starting to look forward to the 2024 season. Curbs, they have their coach in place. It's Drew Bannister. It's his first training camp as the head coach of the Blues. What are some of the things that he can instill in this team in his first opportunity as the head coach at training camp?
Yeah, this is always one of those things, BK, where you come in as the interim head coach, you're halfway through the year, you see some things, but there's certain things that's just really hard to implement. Now he's had a summer to plan. He's had a summer to kind of figure out what direction he wants to go, how they're going to handle camp. And so the tone of this team, and I think the biggest tone that he tried to set is even in games that we're going to lose, we're going to be a factor. There's a consistency to the level of play that he was looking for and didn't see it at times throughout the second half of last season, even though they did get to 10 games under 500. I think that hard-working, get-at-it, effort tone is what he's going to set from day one of training camp here. So to me, I think that's going to be the biggest thing. It's going to give him an opportunity to get those special teams in place, really work through them a little bit. It wouldn't shock me to see some veteran players play an extra game or two in the preseason, maybe than they normally might. It wouldn't shock me if they cut camp down, a little bit quicker at some point to where you're breaking camp earlier with more of the players that are going to be around. Because the first little bit of camp can be a little cumbersome because of all the players that are there. So looking forward to all that, I think the biggest thing he's going to set a tone is a tone of accountability. There's no doubt with when we saw what he did with Butch Navich or Thomas or other veteran players throughout the season, whether it be sitting them on the bench or scratch or whatever, he set a tone of accountability. I got to think players are coming in wondering now that he's got the main job, is he still going to do that? And they might test it a little bit. I mean, let's face it, sometimes it's like kids and parents. And I think the tone of accountability right off the bat is going to be a big thing for Drew Bannister to set.
Curbs, we were just talking during more likely to happen, and BK kind of made me start thinking, we had a question evolving around where the points were for the Blues last year at 92. It required 98 points to get to the playoffs last year, which is where the Las Vegas Golden Knights finished. Do you think it's going to take more or less than 98 points to get to the playoffs this season?
The only reason that I wonder if it'll take less is I think the parity's getting a little bit even more. So if some of those bottom teams, if say the Blues pick up a few more wins, they got to come from somewhere. So unless everybody's picking on the Sharks, who the Blues did not pick on last year, right? But if everybody's picking on one team, that's one thing. But no, if you really look at it, whether it's 95 or 98, we're talking 3 points difference. It seems to always be in that range, Tanner, and I think it's going to stay in that range. And I think that's more really an outcome of the fact that teams have figured out how to get those points in the shootout, and there's always those 3-point games, and it's raised that bar a little bit. So if there's a lot of parity where you have less overtime, you could see that number drop. If the overtime stay about the same, then I expect it to still take 95 to 98 points to make the playoffs.
Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. He's joining us here on 101 ESPN. In about 5 minutes, we'll give you that chance to win a pair of lawn tickets to see Green Day with special guest Rancid. That's next Thursday night at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. You have to be watching on the YouTube stream, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL for a chance to win those today. Curbs, I am curious, when you look at this offseason and the way the teams went about their business, the Nashville Predators went out there and made some massive moves. And there's a piece the other day about how teams have gone about it with stars versus kind of a level cap sheet. And I asked you about that on Monday. When you look at the way that the Predators did this, did they take a page out of Vegas's playbook? And do you think that is something that other teams will follow suit if there's success with Nashville this year? 3, 2, and 1. And it appears that we have lost Chris Kerber, or he just hated the question.
Wow. I thought it was such a good question. He's still thinking.
He hated the question so much that he said, I'm done. I'm not on the show anymore. I'm never coming back. I don't like being on here with BK and T-Bone. I like it when Alex is here.
Hey, I get it, man.
But the reason why I'm asking this is because To me, Vegas is the team that if I'm a fan, I want my team to emulate the way that they build their roster.
Put guys on LTIR.
I know it's frustrating for other fan bases across the league, but it's kind of like what we were talking about with the Cardinals in the 12 o'clock hour. You want your team to really go for it, right? You want them to believe this is our year to win whatever it is, the Stanley Cup, the World Series, the Super Bowl. And most teams on any given season aren't actually trying to win the championship, right? They're trying to win as many games as possible to keep fans in the stands, keep the interest, and to keep themselves in contention for years to come. Nashville's going for it now. Like, they want to win right now. And if they don't, there's hell to pay on the other end of this. Just like Vegas, it feels like at some point is going to have to pay for what they've been able to do with all of these star players being accumulated. But Nashville, to me, seems like the type of team that did take a page out of the Vegas Golden Knights playbook. And now everybody gets to find out if it works outside of Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because I love the fact that they decided to go for it, and they didn't make just, a bunch of it wasn't just, oh, hey, they went out and they signed 5 guys. They went out and they got legit stars, and that's the way that they decided to build it, just like just like Vegas does as well.
All right, now we have Kerbs back, I do believe. Kerbs, question I was asking was about the Nashville Predators and if they took a page out of Vegas's playbook this offseason. And as a secondary piece to that, do you think other teams will follow suit if it works for Nashville? Where do you fall on that?
You know what, Brandon, working backwards on that, I do think other teams are going to follow suit, and I don't think it's just teams in the National Hockey League. I think if you're an NFL team, if you're a Major League Baseball team, I think there's something to look at. I think the Vegas Golden Knights have shown a different way to build and maintain a team. Now, they haven't been bit in the cap yet, and they didn't get bit during the flat cap, so that tells you something. But pulling it back to your question about Nashville, I think the answer to that is 1,000%. You go out and you sign Steven Stamkos to a 4-year contract at $8 million per, and he's 34. Can still be effective. Last year it was Ryan O'Reilly at age 32. He's now 33. 4 years at 4.5. They had Jonathan Marchessault. They added this guy at 33 years of age at 5.5 on a 4-year contract. This is either going to work or it's not going to work. There is not a lot of youth on this Nashville team. And so they looked at it and they say, I'm going to maybe milk the last 2 or 3 years of these veteran guys, but these veteran guys know how to win. And it's going to be extremely competitive for them. So I think Nashville's still going to have to find a way to fill in with some younger guys somewhere in there. But I absolutely think that Barry Trotz has taken a page out of it and said the Nashville Predators were a team that was in this mode where they could have gone either way. And when they made the change from David Poile and brought in Barry Trotz, and they were kind of losing some identity, and he grabbed that right back with that signing of Ryan O'Reilly. And then when they went after Stamkos, they realized the market that they've got down there and how important it is. So I think they absolutely did. And I frankly think the Vegas Golden Knights are changing sports the way they're building a team and are showing people another way where you can not only maintain it, but you can build it a little bit quicker. And I hope they do so because it's an exciting way to do it.
And Kerbs, you talking about that made me think just now, if you're the St. Louis Blues in 2-3 years from now, you have these entry-level contracts hit, you got guys that are making league minimum. It kind of positions Blues almost perfectly to potentially do that as well if these guys come in and are taking advantage of the opportunity like a Dvorsky and Snuggerud 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think the Blues have kind of done a little bit of a hybrid here. Doug Armstrong did something that you don't see many teams do either. He decided to just cut bait on a current core. Instead of kind of milking more out of them, he decided to say, I'm going to do a turnaround now because I like what's coming. I like that we have Snuggerud in the mix. I like that we have a chance to get some first-round picks. I like the way this draft is going to look. I like Thomas. I like Kyra. I like Parayko. I like where Bennington and our young goaltenders are coming on behind him. And he says, I'm going to make the move now. You don't see that happen very often. Look at the Washington Capitals, maybe, for example. So that they kind of tried to milk as long as it could, and it might be biting them at this point in time. That said, if the Blues were doing it kind of truly like Vegas has done, you might have cut 1 or 2 veterans loose, but you would have kept some of the other ones. So I almost see if Doug Armstrong's done a little bit of a hybrid of this. But, Tanner, you're absolutely right. Another year or two, you cut one guy loose, you bring in a couple of those veterans, and it'll put you right over the top, and you're playing in that sandbox with those 30-year-olds. Maybe like when they signed Bozak at the age of 30 back in 2019, that kind of thing. But I think the cool part is I just don't think teams have to go into this 8, 9 year, 6, 7, 8, 9 year rebuild like we've seen San Jose and other teams do and stuff. There's a way to do it with veteran players now, and I think you can find the balance. Vegas has shown the way, and I think Nashville has followed suit a bit.
Curbs, we appreciate the time as always, my man. People can enjoy the second annual Blues and Brews coming up on Friday evening, September 20th at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. This was an amazing time last year. It was one of our first events that we went to with Luca. It was like 4 months after he was born, so we had a couple months after he was born, so we had a really good time with him. Get fired up for the Blues season at the outdoor street party. It features live music, plus appearances from Blues players, alumni, food trucks. My guess is that Chris Kerber's probably going to be there. Tickets just $20 on sale right now. Learn more at 101ESPN.com.
Awesome event. It was a lot of fun. We're going to do it again. Great working with 101 and Anheuser-Busch and everybody involved. It's a fun night. So get the tickets early for that, though, because it is a fun night. Players will be there, and it's fun. But it's an awesome time, BK, and we look forward to seeing you guys down there again.
Absolutely. Curbs, appreciate the time, man. We'll talk with you again next week.
All right, cheers, guys. Have an awesome week.
That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. And right now, it's your chance to win a a pair of tickets to see Green Day with special guest Rancid. That's next Thursday night, August 15th. Text in at 314-399-9646 if you are texter number 11. And you have the correct answer to the following question at 314-399-9646. You are getting that pair of tickets to see Green Day. If you were watching the YouTube stream, you saw I put up a picture of a gentleman, and if you have his name and you are texter number 11 at 314-399-9646, you are getting that pair of tickets to see Green Day next Thursday night. With Tanner and Grant, I'm BK. We're going to hit the rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Tanner and Grant on BK. Hey, congratulations to Greg, who's going home with today's pair of lawn tickets to see Green Day with special guest Rancid. Your next chance to win coming up on the Fast Lane. We'll be giving away another pair tomorrow here on BK and Ferrario. If you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
The answer to our question of the picture that I was holding up was Eric Fetty, who's going to be starting tonight for the Cardinals. The first start didn't go as he planned. He got out to a rough go of it, and he wasn't right. He ended up settling in, got you through 5, gave you a chance to win, but the damage had already been done, gave up 5 runs, and that was it for the Cardinals. T-Bone, what are you expecting from him tonight? Going up against a fine Tampa Bay team, but a team that you should be able to have some success against. They've got a righty on the mound, so it sets up well for your offense. Are you anticipating a better go of it tonight for Eric Fetty?
Yeah, I am. I think you're going to see 6 innings, kind of 2 earned runs would be what my expectation is tonight. Something that looks better. A quality start is kind of what I'm hoping for tonight out of Eric Fetty. And he's faced them before. He shoved in his outing against them earlier this
got
year.
Got into the 9th inning.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a really good bounce back outing from Eric Fetty. And I think, and I mentioned this on Monday, I think when we talk about like number 3s across baseball, and that's what I think he is as a number 3, I think you always see that like one inning is the one inning that really kind of sways what their overall line is. So I think when he gives up 3 earned runs tonight, potentially 2 earned runs, it's probably going to be you look back on just like that Cubs game where it is, there was that one weird ending where things just kind of went awry for him. After that, though, he really settles in and he gives you a solid performance.
Taj Bradley on the mound for the Rays later on this afternoon or later on this evening. The only Cardinal that has faced Taj Bradley was Tommy Pham. He went 0 for 2 with a strikeout against him, so no hitter versus pitcher matchup statistics for the Cardinals tonight, unfortunately. Will not see any of that. He's a right-handed pitcher, very young so far this year. He's a little better against righties than lefties. The splits aren't crazy significant, but a good, talented young pitcher and a guy that the Cardinals are not going to be able to put up a ton of runs against, I wouldn't think. This is the kind of situation where you need that power, and that means, my hope, Nolan Gorman back into the lineup. Let's see what he can do against a pitcher like Taj Bradley.
I'll be curious to see what the lineup looks like as well. Do they move some of those lefties back up? Where is Nolan Arenado? Like I think ideally you're talking about Arenado being outside the top 5 for tonight's starting lineup.
If you were putting it together, Mason 1 still batting leadoff for me. Burleson 2.
Contreras 3. I would
probably put Contreras 4. If I'm being honest with you,
3?
Either Newt or Donovan, one of those two.
I'd be
put a lefty bat into the middle of that order, and then Contreras is a guy that I know he hasn't been hitting well lately, but I trust him to drive runners in. Put him 5th, and then put him 4th. And then whoever I didn't have in that 3 hole, probably putting them 5 would be the way that I would do it.
I think ideally for me...
And then I would put Gorman 6, potentially.
Yeah, I think ideally for me, you go Win 1, Burley 2. I would go Contreras 3, Pham 4.
Okay.
And then I would go 5 is where I'd probably go Nootbaar, 6 Donovan.
Actually, now that I think about it, I kind of like Pham batting 5th.
Either one. Like, long as he's in that top 5, I'm there. But I would have Nootbaar 4 or 5, depending on what you do with Pham. And then I think it's just kind of back and forth between Goldie, Donovan, Arenado, and Gorman. Fastlane
will be playing the lineup game later on this afternoon. For Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.